My son thought I was just a senile old man good for spare parts. He thought that because I gave him my kidney to save his life, I had also given him permission to steal my legacy. He watched his wife kick me out of my own house while I was still bleeding from the surgery staples. They thought they had buried me alive in a cheap nursing home. But they forgot one thing. I am Otis King. I built the foundation of this family with my own sweat, and I know exactly where the demolition charges are planted. Before I tell you how I turned their victory champagne into vinegar, do me a favor. Hit that like button and subscribe if you believe that betrayal should never go unpunished. And tell me in the comments, have you ever sacrificed everything for someone who didn't deserve a dime? I am Otis King, 72 years old. My hands are rough like sandpaper, and my back is stiff from 40 years of laying brick and pouring concrete in the Chicago wind. I thought I had built a dynasty. I thought I had raised a son to be a man. But as I opened my eyes in that recovery room, the only thing I had built was my own coffin. The anesthesia was still heavy in my head, a thick gray fog that made the room spin. My mouth felt like I had swallowed a handful of dry sand. I blinked, trying to focus on the ceiling tiles. The pain hit me a second later, a sharp burning fire in my lower left side. It took the breath out of my lungs. I reached down, my fingers brushing against the thick bandages wrapped around my waist. I smiled. It was a weak, tired smile, but it was real. I had done it. I had given Darnell a second chance. My boy was going to live. I turned my head, expecting to see him. I expected to see Darnell sitting in the chair next to the bed, or maybe standing there with that goofy grin he used to have when I taught him how to fish. I wanted to hear him say, "Thanks, Pop." I wanted to hear him say, "We made it." But the chair was empty. Instead, the heavy door pushed open. The click-clack of expensive high heels echoed on the linoleum floor. It was a sound I knew well. It was the sound of my daughter-in-law, Tiffany. She walked in like she owned the hospital. She was wearing a cream-colored power suit that probably cost more than my first truck. Her hair was pulled back tight, her makeup was flawless, and her eyes were cold as ice. She didn't look at my face. She didn't look at the monitors beeping steadily beside me. She looked at the clock on the wall as if I were an appointment that was running late. "Tiffany," I croaked, my voice rasping in my throat. "Where is Darnell? Is he okay? Does the kidney work?" She stopped at the foot of the bed. She didn't come closer. She didn't reach out to hold my hand. In her right hand, she held a black plastic garbage bag. It was cinched tight at the top. "Darnell is fine, Otis," she said. Her voice was flat, professional, like she was explaining a mortgage rate to a client. The transplant was a success. His body accepted the organ immediately. "Thank God," I whispered, closing my eyes for a moment. "That is all I prayed for." Tiffany dropped the black bag onto the foot of my bed. It landed with a soft thud. It looked lumpy and sad. "We need to talk about the recovery process," she said. I tried to sit up, wincing as the staples pulled at my skin. "Yeah," I said. "When can I go home? I hate hospitals. I want to sleep in my own bed. I want to sit on my porch and watch the lake." Tiffany let out a short sigh like she was dealing with a slow child. "That is the problem, Otis. You cannot go home." I frowned, the fog in my brain clearing just enough to let the confusion in. "What do you mean?" The doctor said 3 days. "I am strong as an ox." "It is not about you," she said, crossing her arms. "It is about Darnell. He is on heavy immunosuppressants. His immune system is basically zero right now. The doctor said he needs a completely sterile environment. No germs, no dust. And frankly, Otis, you are a walking health hazard." I stared at her. I had showered every day of my life. I kept my house spotless. "I am his father," I said, my voice hardening. "I just gave him a part of my body. I am not a germ." "You work with dirt, Otis," she said, inspecting her manicured fingernails. "You have always been rustic. We cannot take the risk. Darnell needs absolute purity. And besides, the house is too small for 3 people when one of them needs 24-hour care." "Too small," I repeated. The house was 6,000 square feet. I built it with 5 bedrooms specifically, so my family would never be cramped. "So where am I supposed to go?" I asked, feeling a cold dread starting to pool in my stomach that had nothing to do with the surgery. Tiffany pointed to the window. "I made arrangements. There is a van waiting downstairs. It is from the Sunset Pines facility." Sunset Pines. I knew that place. It was a state-funded warehouse for the elderly on the far side of town. It was where people went to die when nobody loved them. It smelled of urine and boiled cabbage. "You are joking," I said. "I am not going to a nursing home. I have a home. My name is on the deed." Tiffany smiled then. It was a tight, triumphant smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Actually, it isn't." She reached into her designer purse and pulled out a folded piece of paper. She unfolded it and held it up. It was a legal document. I squinted, trying to read the fine print without my glasses. "Do you remember signing the consent forms before the surgery?" "Otis," she asked softly, "you were very anxious. You were in a lot of pain. The nurse gave you a little extra morphine to help you relax." I remembered. I remembered the nurse. I remembered Tiffany standing over me holding a stack of papers, telling me it was just standard liability waivers for the hospital. She had held the pen for me because my hands were shaking. She had guided my signature. I signed the medical release, I said. "You signed a quitclaim deed," she corrected me. "You transferred the title of the property on Lakeshore Drive to Darnell and myself. It was a gift, Otis. A beautiful, generous gift to ensure your son's future security." The room went silent. The beeping of the monitor seemed to speed up. Beep, beep, beep. "You tricked me," I whispered. "You drugged me and you stole my house." "I helped you do what was best," she said, putting the paper back in her purse. "Darnell agrees. He thinks it is for the best. He thinks you are too old to manage such a big property anyway. He wants you to be somewhere safe, somewhere with supervision." I felt a surge of rage so hot it almost blinded me. I ripped the IV line out of my arm. Blood splattered onto the white sheets. "Where is he?" I roared, swinging my legs over the side of the bed. The pain tore through me, but I didn't care. "Where is my son? Let me talk to him." "Darnell would never do this." Tiffany didn't flinch. She pressed the call button on the wall. "Darnell is in isolation," she said calmly. "And he doesn't want to see you. He is very emotional right now. He thinks you are having a mental breakdown, which looking at you now seems accurate." Two large security guards burst into the room. They were wearing dark uniforms and looking ready for a fight. "He is becoming violent," Tiffany told them, stepping back and pointing at me. "He is delirious. Please remove him from the premises. The transport van is waiting at the south exit." "Get your hands off me," I growled as the first guard grabbed my arm. "I am Otis King. I built this wing of the hospital. Check the plaque in the lobby." "Sir, you need to calm down," the guard said, twisting my arm behind my back. I looked at Tiffany. She was picking up her purse, smoothing down her skirt. She looked bored. "My clothes?" I yelled. "Those are hospital gowns." She pointed to the black trash bag on the bed. "I packed your things," she said. "I picked out some comfortable sweatpants. You won't need suits where you are going." The guards dragged me toward the door. My bare feet dragged on the cold floor. I fought them. I wasn't going to let them take me without a fight. But I was 72 years old and I was missing an organ. My strength was gone. "Tiffany," I shouted, looking back at her. "You listen to me. You think you won. You think you took my house." She looked at me one last time before the guards shoved me into the hallway. "Goodbye, Otis," she said. "Try to enjoy retirement." They dragged me down the corridor. Nurses stopped and stared. People whispered. I saw the pity in their eyes. They saw a crazy old man being evicted. They didn't see a father who had just been gutted by the people he loved most. They took me down the service elevator. They didn't even take me through the main lobby. They threw me out the back door onto the loading dock where the dumpsters were kept. The Chicago sky was gray and heavy. Rain was falling in sheets, freezing cold rain that soaked through my thin hospital gown in seconds. I clutched the black trash bag to my chest, shivering uncontrollably. The van from Sunset Pines was there. It was a rusted white Ford with a dented bumper. The driver, a guy with a cigarette hanging out of his mouth, honked the horn. "You coming or what, Pops?" he yelled over the rain. "I ain't got all day." I stood there in the rain. Water dripped off my nose. The incision in my side was throbbing with a dull, heavy ache. I looked up at the hospital tower. Somewhere on the 4th floor in a warm, sterile room, my son was lying in a bed alive because of the blood I gave him, protected by the wife who had just stolen my life. I looked at the trash bag in my hands. This was it. 40 years of hard labor. 40 years of sacrifice. Reduced to a bag of old clothes and a ride in a rusted van. But as the cold water ran down my back, something happened. The shock started to fade, and in its place a small, hot ember of anger began to glow. They thought I was trash. They thought I was finished. I didn't get in the van. I waved the driver away. "Beat it," I growled. He looked surprised, shrugged, and drove off, splashing dirty water onto my legs. I stood alone in the alley. I was bleeding. I was homeless. I was broke. But I wasn't dead. Tiffany had made one mistake. She had left me with the one thing she couldn't steal: my mind. And as I started to limp toward the street, leaning against the brick wall for support, I made a promise to the gray sky. I was going to get it back, all of it. And I wasn't going to use a lawyer. I wasn't going to use a gun. I was going to use the very ground they stood on. I turned my collar up against the wind and started walking. It was a long walk to the south side, but I had walked it before. I was Otis King, and the king was coming for his throne. I walked for 3 miles in the freezing Chicago rain. My side was burning like someone had left a lit cigar inside my incision, but I did not stop moving. I couldn't stop. If I stopped, the cold would get into my bones and I might never get up again. I was Otis King. I was not going to die on a sidewalk like a stray dog. I made my way to the Palmer House Hilton. It was a place I had done business for 30 years. I had shaken hands with mayors in the lobby. I had celebrated million-dollar contracts in the bar. The doorman looked at my wet sweatpants and the black trash bag in my hand and stepped in front of the revolving door. "Can I help you, sir?" he asked, his voice tight with suspicion. "It is me," I said, pushing my wet hair out of my eyes. "It is Otis King. Get out of my way, son." He squinted, looking past the grime and the bloodstain on my shirt. Recognition dawned on his face, followed by shock. "Mr. King," he stammered. "I am so sorry. I didn't recognize you. I look like hell." I finished for him. "I need a room, the penthouse suite, and I need a doctor." I walked to the front desk. The marble floor was slippery under my wet sneakers. I pulled my wallet out of the trash bag. It was the only thing I had managed to grab before the guards threw me out. I pulled out my American Express black card. It was heavy. It was made of titanium. It was the symbol of everything I had achieved. I slapped it on the counter. One night I told the clerk, "And get me a bottle of bourbon." The young woman behind the desk looked at the card, then at me. She typed something into her computer. She frowned. She swiped the card. The machine beeped. A harsh, angry sound. She tried it again. Beep. "Mr. King," she said softly, "the card has been declined. Try the Visa." I said, my hand shaking as I pulled out another card. "Declined. Try the MasterCard." "Declined." She looked up at me with pity. That look hurt more than the surgery. "Sir, the system says these accounts have been frozen by the primary account holder's power of attorney. There is a flag on your file. It says—" She paused, biting her lip. "What does it say?" I demanded. "It says the owner has been declared mentally incompetent due to advanced dementia," she whispered. "All assets are under the control of Mrs. Tiffany King." I laughed. It was a dry, cracking sound that made the people in the lobby turn and stare. Dementia, that was her play. She hadn't just stolen my house. She had stolen my name. She had declared me crazy so she could lock up my money. I was a billionaire on paper, but right now I couldn't even buy a sandwich. I took my cards back. "Keep the room," I said. "I prefer fresh air anyway." I walked back out into the rain. I had no money, I had no car, I had no phone, as mine was still sitting on the bedside table in the hospital. I was a ghost in my own city. I couldn't stay downtown. The police would pick me up for vagrancy, and if they ran my name, they would see the medical alert Tiffany had probably put out. They would drag me to the nursing home. I had to go back to the beginning. I walked to the subway station and jumped the turnstile. I took the red line south. The deeper we went into the south side, the more the faces on the train looked like mine. Tired, hard, survivors. I got off at 63rd Street. The smell of the neighborhood hit me. Fried chicken, exhaust fumes, and damp concrete. It smelled like home. I walked 3 blocks to a building with bars on the windows and a neon sign that buzzed and flickered. Jerome's Pawn and Loan. I banged on the metal shutter. "We are closed," a voice boomed from inside. "Come back tomorrow or I call the dogs." "Jerome," I yelled. "It is Otis. Open the damn door." There was a silence. Then the sound of heavy locks turning. The shutter rolled up. Jerome stood there. He was 6 feet 5 inches of muscle, wearing a gold chain thick enough to tow a truck. He looked at me, his eyes going wide. "Mr. O," he said. He pulled me inside and slammed the shutter down. He looked at the trash bag. He looked at my shivering hands. "What happened, boss?" he asked. "I saw on the news you were in surgery. I thought you were living the good life." I sat down on a crate of old vinyl records. Jerome handed me a towel and a bottle of cheap brandy. I drank it straight, feeling the fire burn away the chill. I told him everything. The surgery, the quitclaim deed, the nursing home van, the frozen accounts. Jerome listened, his fists clenching and unclenching. He was a man of the streets. He knew about robbery. But this was cold. So they took it all. Jerome asked quietly. "The house, the money, the cars. They took everything that had my name on it," I said. I reached into the trash bag and pulled out the one thing of value I had left. It was a vintage Patek Philippe watch. Lucille had given it to me for our 30th anniversary. It was worth $50,000 easily. "I need cash, Jerome," I said, holding it out. "And I need a burner phone. And I need a place to sleep that isn't a cage." Jerome pushed the watch back to me. "Keep your watch, Mr. O," he said. "You paid for my mother's funeral when nobody else would help me. My shop is your shop. You sleep in the back office. It ain't the Ritz, but it's warm." He went to the register and pulled out a stack of 20s and a prepaid smartphone. I turned on the phone. My fingers felt thick and clumsy. I dialed the only number I had memorized besides my own. Darnell. I didn't call. I texted, "I am alive, and I am watching." The reply came 3 minutes later. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't a plea for forgiveness. "Dad, please stop. You are sick. Tiffany is doing this for your own good. You are confused. The house is already sold. We signed the papers an hour ago. We are moving on. Please just go to the nursing home. You are old. You don't need that much money anyway. Let us live our lives." I stared at the screen. "You are old. You don't need money." That was it. That was the sentence that severed the last thread of hope I had for my son. He didn't just stand by and watch. He justified it. He told himself I was a burden so he wouldn't have to feel like a thief. He was weak, and his weakness had made him evil. I put the phone down. I didn't cry. I felt a strange sense of calm settle over me. The father in me died in that pawn shop. The businessman was waking up. "Jerome," I said. "Do you still have the number for Bull Johnson?" The lawyer Jerome asked. "The one who got disbarred for bribing a judge in '98. "That is the one," I said. Jerome scrolled through his contacts and read the number out loud. I dialed. It rang 4 times. "Yeah," a gravelly voice answered. "Who is this?" "It is Otis King Bull." There was a pause. Then a laugh that sounded like a car engine trying to start. "Otis, I heard you were dead. Or crazy. Or both. I am neither," I said. "I need you to work for me. I don't practice anymore, Otis. They took my license. I spend my days betting on horses and drinking bad scotch. I don't need you to go to court, Bull," I said. "I need you to go to the Hall of Records." I explained the situation. I told him about the quitclaim deed Tiffany had tricked me into signing. "She got you?" Otis Bull said, his voice sympathetic. "If you signed it, and she has witnesses, and she has a power of attorney saying you are incompetent, it is airtight. She owns the house. She can sell it to the Pope if she wants to." I leaned back against the dusty shelves of the pawn shop. I looked at a rusted circular saw hanging on the wall. I remembered using a saw just like that when I cleared the lot on Lakeshore Drive 50 years ago. "Bull," I said softly. "Do you remember when I bought that property in 1970? "Yeah," Bull said. "I handled the closing. It was a mess. The previous owner was a racist who didn't want to sell to a black man." "Exactly," I said. "He wouldn't sell me the house, so I had to get creative. We set up a land trust." I heard Bull stop breathing on the other end of the line. I could hear the gears in his legal mind starting to turn grinding off the rust. Otis Bull whispered, "Are you saying what I think you are saying?" "I bought the dirt, Bull," I said. "I bought the land under a 99-year ground lease. The house, the structure, was a separate deed. I built the new mansion on top of it, but I never merged the titles." I paused, letting the implication hang in the air. "Tiffany made me sign a quitclaim deed for the residence," I said. "She owns the bricks. She owns the roof. She owns the marble floors she loves so much. But she doesn't own the ground it sits on." Bull finished, and I could hear the grin in his voice. "She sold the house today, Bull," I said. But a house can't exist without land. And according to the original lease agreement from 1970, if the structure is transferred to a hostile party without the landowner's consent, Bull quoted from memory, the landowner has the right to sever all ground connections. Exactly, I said. I looked at Jerome, who was watching me with wide eyes. Jerome, give me another drink, I said. Bull, I continued into the phone. Get down to the records office first thing in the morning. Pull the original land trust agreement. Tiffany thinks she sold a $5 million mansion. I want you to prove that she actually just sold a pile of bricks sitting on my private property. And Otis Bull asked, what about the utilities? The water pipes, the electric lines, they run through your ground. I smiled. It was the first time I had smiled for real since the surgery. That is the best part, Bull. Those aren't city pipes. I laid them myself in 1972. They are private infrastructure. And as the landlord, I think I have a maintenance issue that needs immediate attention. I hung up the phone. I lay down on the cot in the back room. The smell of old electronics and dust was thick, but to me it smelled like a war room. Darnell thought I was helpless. Tiffany thought I was senile. They forgot that before I was a rich man, I was a builder. And a builder knows that if you control the foundation, you control the house. Let them have their party tonight. Let them drink their champagne. Tomorrow the landlord is coming to collect rent, and the price is going to be higher than they can pay. The smell of old electronics and dust in the back room of Jerome's pawn shop was a far cry from the lavender air fresheners Tiffany used to spray in my house. But to me, this dusty room smelled like truth. I sat on a milk crate staring at a wall covered in pawn tickets while Jerome paced back and forth. He had been out on the street all morning digging into the shadows of Chicago, pulling on threads that I didn't even know existed. When he finally stopped pacing and looked at me, his face was grim. Jerome is a big man built like a linebacker with hands that can crush a brick but handle a diamond with the tenderness of a surgeon. He doesn't get scared easily, but today he looked worried. You were right, boss, Jerome said, his voice low and heavy. It wasn't just greed, it was desperation. They are drowning, Mr. Otis. They are underwater so deep they can't even see the surface. Tell me, I said, leaning forward on my cane. Jerome pulled a crumbled piece of paper from his pocket. I talked to my cousin who runs security at the Riverboat Casino, and I have a buddy who works in the back office of a crypto exchange. He smoothed the paper out on the desk. Darnell owes $2 million, Jerome said. I felt a sharp pain in my chest right where my heart used to beat with pride for my son. $2 million. Gambling, I asked. Sports betting and high-stakes poker. Jerome nodded. He has been chasing losses for 3 years. The sharks he owes. They aren't the kind who send you a bill in the mail. They are the kind who break your legs first and ask for payment later. That is why he needed the house, Mr. Otis. He has a deadline. If he doesn't pay by Friday, they are going to hurt him. I closed my eyes. My son wasn't just weak. He was in danger. And Tiffany? I asked. What is her excuse? Jerome let out a dry laugh. She is worse. She thinks she is the Wolf of Wall Street. She leveraged everything she had, including money she stole from your business accounts, to buy into some new cryptocurrency. It was a Ponzi scheme, boss. The whole thing collapsed last week. She lost $3 million overnight. I did the math in my head. $2 million for the mob, $3 million for the fake coins, $5 million. That is exactly what the house is listed for, I whispered. They aren't selling the house to get rich, Jerome said. They are selling it to stay alive. They need $5 million cash, and they need it today. Just then my burner phone buzzed. Jerome had set up a remote link to the security cameras at my house. Tiffany thought she had locked me out, but she forgot that I was the one who installed the system. I had the master code. I looked at the small screen. There was a black limousine pulling up to my driveway. A man in a sharp gray suit stepped out. He looked like money. He walked with the confidence of a man who buys skyscrapers for breakfast. That is the buyer, Jerome said, looking over my shoulder. That is Marcus Sterling. He is a developer from New York. He pays cash, and he doesn't like to wait. I watched on the screen as Tiffany greeted him at the door. She was wearing her best realtor smile, but I could see the tension in her neck. She was desperate. If this man wrote a check today, she could pay off the debts. She could save Darnell's legs. She could hide her theft. She could win. I watched them walk through the foyer. I saw Sterling nodding. He liked the marble floors. He liked the high ceilings. He liked the empire I had built. Tiffany was talking fast, pointing at the crown molding, probably telling him about the imported Italian stone. She was selling him a dream, but she was selling him a lie. I put the phone down on the desk. "Jerome," I said, "hand me the laptop." Jerome slid the battered computer over to me. I opened it up. The screen glowed in the dim room. I didn't need to go to the house. I didn't need to make a scene. I just needed to send one email. I opened a new message. In the recipient line, I typed the email address of Marcus Sterling's brokerage firm. I had found it online in 5 minutes. Subject: urgent, title defect. 1500 Lakeshore Drive. I didn't write a long letter. I didn't rant about my ungrateful son. Businessmen like Sterling don't care about family drama. They care about liability. They care about risk. I attached a single PDF file. It was a scan of a document I had kept in my safe deposit box for 50 years, the 1970 underground zoning map and ground lease agreement. I typed a short message. "Dear Mr. Sterling, before you purchase the structure at 1500 Lakeshore Drive, you should be aware that the land beneath it is owned by a separate entity. The ground lease explicitly states that any transfer of the structure without the landowner's written consent results in the immediate forfeiture of all subsurface infrastructure rights. Buying this house is buying a car with no engine. Proceed at your own risk. Signed, the landlord." I hovered my finger over the enter key. "If I send this," I said to Jerome, "the deal dies. And if the deal dies, the sharks come for Darnell." Jerome looked at me. He didn't tell me what to do. He just waited. I thought about Darnell lying in that hospital bed, letting his wife throw a garbage bag at me. I thought about the text message he sent me. "You are old. You don't need money." "He made his bed," I said softly. "Now he has to sleep in it." I pressed send. Whoosh! The email was gone. I picked up the phone again and watched the camera feed. 5 minutes passed. Tiffany was showing Sterling the library. She was laughing at something he said. They were shaking hands. It looked like a done deal. Then Sterling's phone rang. He pulled it out of his pocket. He looked at the screen. He frowned. He held up a hand to stop Tiffany from talking. He listened for a moment. Then he looked at Tiffany. His face changed. The smile vanished. The warmth evaporated. He looked like a shark that had just smelled rotten meat. He said something to her. I couldn't hear the audio, but I could read his body language. He was angry. Tiffany looked confused. She shook her head. She waved her hands, trying to explain. Sterling didn't listen. He turned around and walked toward the front door. He walked fast. Tiffany ran after him. She grabbed his arm. He pulled away from her, violently brushing off his sleeve as if she were contagious. He marched out the door, got into his limousine, and slammed the door shut. The car drove away. Tiffany was left standing on the porch. She looked small. She looked terrified. She stood there for a long time, staring at the empty driveway, realizing that her $5 million lifeline had just been cut. My burner phone rang. It was her. I let it ring 3 times before I answered. "Hello, Tiffany," I said, my voice calm and steady. "You evil old bastard," she screamed. Her voice was so shrill it distorted the speaker. "What did you do? What did you send him?" "I sent him the truth," I said. He pulled the offer, she shrieked. "He said the title is toxic. He said he doesn't buy properties with ground lease disputes. Do you have any idea what you just done? We needed that money today." "I know," I said. "Jerome tells me the interest rates on sports betting debts are very high this time of year." There was a silence on the other end, a cold, terrified silence. "You know," she whispered. "I know everything, Tiffany. I know about the gambling. I know about the crypto. I know why you kicked me out. You didn't care about Darnell's health. You needed me gone so you could sell the house to cover your crimes. You have to fix this," she begged, her voice cracking. "Otis, please. These people, they will kill him. They will kill us. Call Sterling back. Tell him it was a joke. Sign the ground lease over to us. Please." I leaned back in my chair. "I am not signing anything," I said. "You are killing your own son," she sobbed. "No," I said. "I already gave him life twice. Once when he was born, and once on that operating table. I am done saving him. If he owes money to bad men, maybe he should have thought about that before he bet the house I built." "Otis, wait. Goodbye, Tiffany." I hung up the phone. I looked at Jerome. He poured me another glass of brandy. "That was cold, boss," he said. "It had to be," I said, taking a sip. The drink was warm, but inside I felt like ice. They wanted to play a grown-up game, Jerome. They wanted to steal a kingdom. Well, they just learned the first rule of being a king. "What is that?" Jerome asked. Never start a war with the man who controls the ground you stand on. I stood up. My side was hurting, but it was a good hurt. It was the pain of a fight. Get some rest, Jerome, I said. The deal is dead. But the war isn't over. Tomorrow she is going to try something desperate. And when she does, we are going to be ready. I walked into the back room and lay down on the cot. I closed my eyes, but I didn't sleep. I lay there listening to the sounds of the city, waiting for the next move. Tiffany was trapped. And a trapped animal is the most dangerous kind. But she didn't know that I had set traps she hadn't even seen yet. The house was just the beginning. The real lesson was just getting started. Bull Johnson's office smelled like expensive cigars and cheap ambition. It was tucked away on the second floor of a brownstone on Michigan Avenue that had survived 3 fires and 2 recessions. Bull was the kind of lawyer you did not find on billboards or TV commercials. If you were innocent, you hired a public defender. If you were guilty, or if you were planning to start a war, you hired Bull. He was 70 years old, shaped like a beer keg, and wore pinstripe suits that cost more than my first truck. We had come up together in the South Side. I built the houses and he kept the inspectors off my back. I sat in the leather chair across from his massive mahogany desk, wincing as the movement pulled at the stitches in my side. Bull was reading the papers I had brought him, the copies of the quitclaim deed Tiffany had tricked me into signing. He had his reading glasses perched on the end of his nose and a glass of scotch in his hand, even though it was only 10 in the morning. He read in silence for a long time. The only sound in the room was the ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner and the heavy rasp of my breathing. Finally, he took off his glasses and tossed the papers onto the desk. He did not look happy. "Otis, you want me to lie to you or you want the truth?" he asked, his voice gravelly and deep. "I did not come here for fairy tales, Bull," I said. "Tell me." "It is airtight," he grumbled, leaning back in his chair. "That woman might be the devil, but she did her homework. The signature is yours. The witnesses are hospital staff who will testify you were conscious. The notary stamp is legit. Legally, the house, the structure, the bricks, and the mortar belongs to Tiffany and Darnell. If we try to fight this in probate court, we will be tied up for 3 years. She will drain the equity before we even get a hearing." I nodded slowly. I expected that. Tiffany was a shark. She would not have made a move unless she knew the water was safe. "Check the real estate listings, Bull," I said. He frowned but turned to his computer. He typed in my address. A few seconds later, he let out a low whistle. "Damn, Otis," he said. "She does not waste time. It is already up on Zillow, listed 3 hours ago. $5.2 million. Cash offers preferred for a quick close." I closed my eyes. $5 million. That was my life's work. That was 40 years of waking up at 4 in the morning. That was the sweat off my back and the ache in my bones. And she was trying to liquidate it in 24 hours to fund whatever Ponzi scheme she was caught up in. "She is desperate," I said. "She owes money. Bad money. She needs that cash before the sharks come for her." Just then, the burner phone I had bought at the pawn shop buzzed in my pocket. I had given the number to only one person besides Jerome, my son. I had texted him earlier just a simple message. "I am alive." I looked at the screen. It was Darnell. I put it on speaker and set it on Bull's desk. Pop Darnell's voice came through thin and shaky. He sounded like he was crying. "Pop, are you okay?" I stared at the phone. I wanted to reach through it and shake him. I wanted to ask him how he could let them cut me open and throw me away. But I stayed silent. "Pop, please," he sobbed. "I am so sorry. I did not know she was going to kick you out so fast. I thought we would have more time to talk about it. But Tiffany, she says it is for the best. She says we need the money to start over. She says the house is too big for us anyway." "You signed the papers too, Darnell," I said, my voice cold. "You watched her pack my bag." I know, he stammered. "But I am sick, Pop. I am so weak. I can't fight her. You know how she is. She just wants us to be secure." "Secure," I repeated. "By making your father homeless." Suddenly, there was a scuffling sound on the other end of the line, a screech. Then Tiffany's voice cut through sharp as a razor. "Stop calling him Darnell!" she yelled. Then she spoke directly into the phone. "Listen to me, old man. I do not know where you are, and I do not care. The house is sold. We have a buyer coming in an hour, a cash buyer from Dubai. By tomorrow morning, the money will be in an offshore account, and there is nothing you or your ghetto lawyers can do about it. So go find a bridge to sleep under and leave us alone. The line went dead. Bull looked at me, his eyebrows raised. That is a charming woman. I picked up the phone and put it back in my pocket. The pain in my side was throbbing again, but the fire in my gut was hotter. Darnell's apology was pathetic. He was not sorry for what he did. He was sorry he felt guilty about it. There is a difference. And Tiffany. She thought she had won. She thought the game was over because she held the deed to the house. But she forgot one thing. She forgot to check the history of the land. Open the safe, Bull, I said. Bull looked confused, but he stood up and walked over to the wall safe behind a painting of the Chicago skyline. He spun the dial and opened the heavy door. Inside was a single yellow document that I had asked him to keep for me 30 years ago. He pulled it out and blew the dust off the cover. The 1970 Land Trust Agreement. Bull read the title. Otis, what is this? I haven't looked at this in decades. I bought that land in 1970, Bull, I said, leaning forward. Back then, they did not want to sell to black folks in that neighborhood. I had to set up a special arrangement. I had to buy the land separately from the structure that was on it. I tore down the old shack and built the mansion myself. But I never merged the deeds. I tapped the desk with my finger. Tiffany has the quitclaim deed for the house, the structure, the walls, the roof, the swimming pool. She owns the building. I paused, letting a small, grim smile touch my lips. But I own the dirt, Bull. I own the ground it sits on. And I own the infrastructure underneath it. Bull's eyes went wide. He flipped through the yellowed pages frantically, his legal mind racing to catch up. He stopped at page 12, his finger tracing a paragraph written in typewriter font. The dead ground clause, he whispered, reading aloud. In the event that the primary beneficiary of the land trust, that is you, Otis, does not reside within the primary structure, or if the structure is transferred to a hostile party without the consent of the trust, the landowner reserves the right to terminate all easements and access rights immediately. He looked up at me, a grin spreading across his face. Easements, Otis. That means the driveway, I said. That means the private road leading up to the house. And, Bull continued reading further. The landowner retains sole ownership and control of all subsurface private utilities installed by King Construction, including but not limited to the private water main and the dedicated electrical substation. Exactly, I said. I leaned back in the chair, ignoring the pain. When I built that house, the city water lines did not reach that far out. I had to lay my own pipes. I had to run my own power lines from the main grid 3 miles away. Those pipes and those wires are not public property, Bull. They are private property, my property. I looked at the clock on the wall. She has a buyer coming in an hour, I said. A cash buyer. They are going to want to inspect the house. They are going to want to flush the toilets. They are going to want to turn on the lights to see the chandeliers. Bull started laughing. It was a deep belly laugh that shook the room. You want to cut them off, he choked out. I do not want to sue her, Bull, I said. I do not want to drag this out in court. I want to make that house uninhabitable. I want to make it worthless. A $5 million mansion is just a pile of fancy bricks if you cannot take a shower in it. But Otis, Bull said, wiping tears of laughter from his eyes. Darnell is in there. He just had surgery. He is in a $5 million house, I said, my voice hardening. He can buy bottled water. Or better yet, he can drink the expensive champagne they bought to celebrate kicking me out. I stood up. Draft the notice, Bull, not a lawsuit. A notice of termination of easement. Delivering it to the utility companies. Tell them that the unauthorized use of my private infrastructure must stop immediately. Tell them to pull the meters. Bull was already typing, his fingers flying across the keyboard. And Otis? He asked without looking up. Yeah. What about the driveway? I walked to the door. I'm going to handle the driveway myself, I said. I have a buddy at the impound lot who owes me a favor. I think a couple of concrete barriers across the entrance will send the right message to that buyer from Dubai. I walked out of the office and back into the cold Chicago wind. I felt lighter. The pain was still there, but now it had a purpose. Tiffany wanted to play games with paper, fine. I was going to play games with physics. She stole the house. I was about to steal the ground from under her feet. I hailed a cab. Take me to the water department, I told the driver, and step on it. I have a valve to close. It had been exactly 1 week since they cut me open. 1 week since they stole a part of my body and threw the rest of me into the garbage. My side was still healing, the stitches pulling tight against my skin with every breath I took. but the pain had changed. It was no longer a sharp, screaming agony. It had settled into a dull, heavy throb, a constant reminder of what had been taken. But as the black Lincoln Town car rolled slowly down the long, winding driveway of the estate I had built with my own hands, I did not feel like a victim. I felt like a judge arriving for sentencing. The house was lit up like a Christmas tree, even though it was late January. Every window I had framed, every archway I had leveled was glowing with golden light. I could hear the music from inside the car, a soft, expensive jazz that drifted out into the cold night air. The driveway was lined with luxury cars, Mercedes, BMWs, Teslas. They were parked on the asphalt I had laid oblivious to the man who owned the ground beneath their tires. Tiffany called it a recovery gala for Darnell. That is what the invitation said. But I knew better. There was a subtle sign near the gate, tasteful and discreet, that said, "Open House." She was selling my life while pretending to celebrate my son's survival. I told Jerome to stop the car right at the front steps. I did not wait for him to open the door. I stepped out into the night. I was not wearing the stained sweatpants and the thin hospital jacket anymore. I was wearing my Sunday best, a three-piece black suit tailored in Italian wool, a crisp white shirt, and a silk tie that cost more than Tiffany's soul. I had my fedora pulled low, and I leaned on a cane, not because I needed it, but because it made me look like exactly what I was. A patriarch, a boss. The valet, a young kid in a red vest, looked confused. He didn't know whether to ask for my keys or ask me to leave. I ignored him and walked up the stone steps. The front door was open. The heat from inside spilled out, carrying the smell of expensive perfume and catering. I walked in. The foyer was packed. There were at least 50 people, mostly white, mostly wealthy, holding flutes of champagne and laughing that polite, hollow laugh that rich folks use when they are bored. They were admiring the crown molding I had installed. They were complimenting the marble floors I had selected, slab by slab. In the center of the room, near the grand staircase, stood Darnell and Tiffany. Darnell was sitting in a wheelchair, looking pale and weak, playing the part of the tragic survivor perfectly. He was wrapped in a cashmere blanket, accepting sympathies like they were donations. Tiffany stood beside him, her hand on his shoulder, looking radiant and victorious in a shimmering silver dress. She was talking to a couple who looked like they owned a bank, gesturing grandly toward the high ceilings. I tapped my cane on the marble floor. Once. Twice. The sound was sharp like a gavel hitting a bench. The conversation near the door died down. People turned to look. The silence spread through the room like a wave rippling outward until the jazz music was the only thing left. Tiffany turned her head. Her smile froze. Her eyes went wide, not with fear, but with a flash of pure, unadulterated annoyance. She excused herself from the potential buyers and marched toward me, her heels clicking aggressively on the stone. "What are you doing here, Otis?" she hissed, keeping her voice low so the guests wouldn't hear. "I thought I made myself clear. You are trespassing." I looked past her at the guests who were now whispering and staring. I saw Darnell shrink into his wheelchair, pulling the blanket up higher as if he could hide from me. "I am not trespassing, Tiffany," I said, my voice projecting just enough to be heard by the room. "I am just checking on my investment." Two large security guards in black suits started moving toward me from the corners of the room. Tiffany raised a hand to stop them, realizing that dragging an old man out by force in front of buyers might spoil the mood. "You have 5 seconds to leave before I have you arrested for harassment." She smiled, a tight, venomous expression that didn't reach her eyes. "You look ridiculous, Otis. Did you steal that suit? You think playing dress-up changes the fact that you are homeless?" I reached into the inside pocket of my jacket. The security guards tensed, probably thinking I was reaching for a weapon. Tiffany flinched. "I did not bring a weapon," I said calmly. "I brought a bill." I pulled out a thick, cream-colored envelope. It wasn't wrinkled, it wasn't dirty, it was sealed with red wax. I held it out not to Tiffany but to Darnell. I walked past her. She was too stunned to stop me. I walked right up to my son. He looked up at me, his eyes full of terror and guilt. He looked at the kidney area of my suit, then at my face. "Pop," he whispered. "Please don't cause a scene." "I am not here to fight, son," I said gently. "I just wanted to give you this. It is the invoice for the kidney rental." A few guests chuckled nervously, thinking it was a joke. Darnell's hands shook as he took the envelope. "Open it," I said. He tore the seal. He pulled out the papers. They were not an invoice. They were photographs. High-resolution photographs taken by a private investigator I had hired 6 months ago, back when I first suspected Darnell was not just sick, but secretive. The first photo was of Darnell in a hotel lobby in Atlanta. He wasn't in a wheelchair then. He was standing laughing with his arm around a young woman, a very young woman. The second photo was of that same woman holding a baby boy who had Darnell's eyes and Darnell's chin. The third document was a copy of a birth certificate. The father's name was listed clearly, Darnell King. Darnell went white. He dropped the photos on his lap. He couldn't breathe. He looked at Tiffany, then at me, then at the floor. Tiffany, who had been watching like a hawk, snatched the photos from his lap before he could hide them. She looked at the woman. She looked at the baby. She looked at the birth certificate. The room held its breath. Everyone knew Tiffany's brand. She was the pious, church-going wife. She posted Bible verses on social media every morning. She built her entire image on the sanctity of marriage and family values. I expected her to scream. I expected her to slap him. I expected her to crumble. That was why I brought the envelope. I wanted to drive a wedge between the two thieves. I wanted to watch them turn on each other. Tiffany stared at the photo of the illegitimate child for a long, agonizing 10 seconds. Then she did something that chilled my blood. She laughed. It was a short, dismissive sound. She looked up at me, her eyes completely dead of emotion. She didn't look at Darnell with anger. She looked at me with pity. "Is this it, Otis?" she asked, waving the photo of the baby. "This is your big play. You think showing me that Darnell has a bastard in Atlanta is going to make me kick him out? You think this is going to stop the sale?" She ripped the photo in half. Then she ripped the birth certificate. She tore them into tiny pieces and let them flutter down onto Darnell's lap like confetti. "You are so old-fashioned," she sneered, stepping closer to me so only I could hear. "You think I care where he puts his thing? You think I care if he has 5 kids in 5 different states?" She leaned in her perfume, thick and cloying. "I don't care about his morals, Otis. I care about his signature. I care about the $5 million this house is going to sell for tomorrow morning. We are not a love story. We are a corporation. And as long as the check clears, Darnell can sleep with the entire city of Atlanta for all I care. Money is the only god in this house now." She stepped back and turned to the security guard, snapping her fingers. "Get this trash out of my house. He is upsetting the buyers." I looked at Darnell. He was sitting there covered in the torn pieces of his secret life, looking small and pathetic. He didn't say a word. He didn't defend his child. He didn't defend his father. He just sat there and let his wife tear up his truth because he was too terrified of losing the money. The guards grabbed my arms. I shook them off. "Do not touch the suit," I warned them. "It costs more than your car." I adjusted my cuffs. I looked at Tiffany one last time. She was already turning back to the buyers, putting that fake plastic smile back on her face, apologizing for the interruption of the senile old man. "You are right, Tiffany," I said, raising my voice so it carried to the rafters. "Money is powerful. It buys houses. It buys silence. It even buys kidneys." I tapped my cane on the floor again. "But money cannot buy water," I said. Tiffany frowned, looking over her shoulder. "What are you talking about?" "Enjoy the champagne," I said, tipping my hat. "Drink as much as you can. It might be the last wet thing you touch in this house." I turned and walked out. The heavy oak doors closed behind me, shutting in the noise, the light, and the rot. I walked down the steps to the waiting Lincoln. The cold air felt clean against my face. Tiffany thought she had won because she had no shame. She thought that because she didn't care about adultery, she was invincible. She thought the only thing that mattered was the deed to the house. I got into the car and looked at the glowing mansion one last time. "Drive," I told Jerome. "Take me to the water main access point on 43rd Street. Jerome put the car in gear. "You sure about this, Mr. King? It is going to cause a hell of a mess." I looked at the torn pieces of paper in my mind, the image of my son cowering under a blanket. "They are thirsty for money, Jerome," I said, watching the house disappear in the rearview mirror. "Let's see how they like being thirsty for everything else." I sat back in the leather seat. The party was just getting started inside, but outside in the dark under the frozen ground, the real party was about to begin. And I was the one controlling the tap. The sun came up over Chicago like a bruised eye, purple and swollen. It was a cold morning, the kind that freezes the breath in your lungs, but for the first time in days, I felt warm. I was sitting on a folding chair at the edge of Jackson Park Lagoon, a fishing rod in my hand, watching the gray water ripple in the wind. I wasn't really fishing. I didn't have any bait on the hook. I was just waiting. I was waiting for the phone to ring. I was waiting for the scream. 5 miles away in the mansion I built the show was about to begin. I knew Tiffany's schedule better than she knew it herself. 9 in the morning. That was when the cash buyer from Dubai was coming back for the final walkthrough. Tiffany would have the house staged to perfection. Fresh flowers in the foyer, the fireplace crackling, the smell of brewing coffee and vanilla candles masking the rot of her soul. She would be walking them through the master suite, showing off the dual rain showers and the infinity tub. She would be talking about flow and feng shui. I checked my watch. 9:15. Right about now, the buyer would ask to use the bathroom. Or maybe Tiffany would turn on the kitchen tap to show off the water pressure. I closed my eyes and imagined the sound, the sputter, the cough of air in the pipes, the dry hollow hiss of a faucet with nothing behind it. My phone buzzed. It wasn't a call. It was a text from Jerome, who was parked down the street from the house. Target is in panic mode. Buyer just walked out. She is screaming at the meter man. I smiled and cast my line a little further into the water. Back at the house, the scene was playing out exactly as I had designed it. The water didn't just stop, it vanished. The 5 bathrooms in the house were now useless porcelain statues. The radiant floor heating system, which relied on hot water circulation, was dead. The massive aquarium in the study, the filters were sucking air. And the swimming pool well without the circulation pumps running, and with the main drain valve I had remotely triggered to flush mode before cutting the power, the water level was dropping fast, leaving a ring of scum and the smell of chlorine turning stagnant. I could see it in my mind. The buyer, a serious man in a tailored suit trying to wash his hands and getting nothing but a blast of rusty air. Tiffany smiling that frozen plastic smile, apologizing, blaming the city, blaming a burst main. She would run to the phone. She would call the Chicago Department of Water Management. She would scream at some poor clerk, and that clerk would look up the address. He would see the flag on the account, and he would say the words that would bring her world crashing down. "I am sorry, ma'am. That address is not serviced by the city. That is a private line owned by OK Construction. The owner requested a service termination." The phone in my pocket started ringing. It was Tiffany. I let it ring. I watched a duck paddle by unbothered by the cold. It rang again. And again. She was persistent. I will give her that. Rats usually are when the ship starts sinking. I waited until the 10th call before I picked up. "Hello," I answered, my voice calm like I had all the time in the world. "Turn it back on," she shrieked. Her voice was so loud I had to hold the phone away from my ear. There was no hello. No how are you. Just pure, unadulterated panic. "Turn what back on, Tiffany?" I asked, adjusting my hat. "The water, you old psycho. The water. The buyer just left. He walked out. He said he doesn't buy broken houses. Do you have any idea what you just did? You cost me $5 million. I reeled in my line a little. "I didn't cost you anything," I said. "I just exercised my rights as a landowner. You own the faucets, Tiffany. You own the pipes inside the walls, but the water that flows through them, that comes from my ground. And I don't give away my resources to strangers. You are going to jail," she screamed. "I called the police. I called your lawyer. This is illegal. You can't cut off utilities to a residence. There is a sick person in here. Darnell needs water." I paused. The mention of Darnell stung, but I pushed the feeling down. "Darnell has a credit card," I said. "He can order Evian." "I'm coming to find you, Otis," she yelled. "I know where you are. Jerome's idiot cousin told me you were at the lagoon. You better be there when I arrive, or I swear to God." She hung up. I put the phone down and poured myself a cup of coffee from my thermos. I wasn't running. I wanted her to come. I wanted her to look me in the eye when she realized that her $5 million kingdom was built on sand. 20 minutes later, a white Range Rover screeched into the gravel parking lot of the park. It was going way too fast. It skidded sideways, kicking up dust and rocks, almost hitting a lamppost. Tiffany jumped out. She wasn't wearing her realtor blazer anymore. She was in a messy bun and a tracksuit, looking like a woman on the edge of a nervous breakdown. She spotted me on the pier and marched over her face, red with rage. "Fix it," she demanded, stopping just inches from my chair. "Fix it right now. Call the company and tell them it was a mistake." I didn't look up. I kept my eyes on the bobber floating in the water. "It wasn't a mistake," I said. She kicked my tackle box. It skittered across the wood planks, spilling hooks and sinkers everywhere. "Stop playing games," she screamed. "Do you know what it smells like in that house? The toilets won't flush, Otis. Darnell is throwing up. He needs to be bathed. He has an incision that needs to be cleaned." "Then take him to a hotel," I said quietly. "Oh, wait. You can't. Because I froze the accounts." She grabbed the collar of my jacket, her nails digging into the wool. "You are a monster," she spat. "You are trying to kill your own son." I looked up then. I looked right into her eyes. "I gave him a kidney," I said, my voice low and dangerous. "I gave him life. And you two took it and tried to erase me. You want to talk about monsters? Look in the mirror, girl." She let go of me, stepping back as if burned. She realized that physical intimidation wasn't going to work. I was old, but I was made of iron. She took a breath, trying to compose herself, trying to switch tactics. The tears started. Fake tears. I had seen them 1,000 times. "Otis, please," she sobbed, clasping her hands together. "Look, I'm sorry. Okay, I'm sorry about the nursing home. I was stressed. Darnell was sick. We weren't thinking clearly. But you made your point. You won. Please just turn the water back on. We can talk about the house. We can work something out." I watched her performance. It was good. Oscar-worthy. But I knew the script. "There is nothing to work out," I said. "You want the water. You can have it." Her eyes lit up. "Really? Thank you, Otis. I knew you were a reasonable man. I'll call the buyer back and—" "It will cost you $1 million, I interrupted. She froze. "What?" "A reconnection fee," I said, shrugging. "Okay. Construction charges a premium for emergency services. $1 million. Cash. Deposited into the account of my choosing." "You're insane," she whispered. "We don't have $1 million liquid. You know that. All our money is tied up in the house." "Then you better sell it fast," I said. "Oh, but wait, you can't sell a house with no water. Sounds like a dilemma, Tiffany." She stared at me with pure hatred. The mask slipped completely. "I will see you dead," she hissed. "I will wait until that other kidney fails, and I will laugh at your funeral." My phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't Tiffany. It was Dr. Hart. I held up a finger to silence Tiffany and answered. "Otis." The doctor's voice was tight with urgency. "Where are you?" "Fishing," I said. "What's wrong?" "Darnell just called me," she said. "He's running a fever, a high one, 103. He says he's dizzy and he's stopped producing urine." My hand tightened on the rod. Stopped producing urine meant the kidney was shutting down. "Is it the rejection?" I asked. "It's dehydration and stress," Dr. Hart said. "He's not drinking enough fluids because the water is off and the cortisol levels from the panic are spiking his blood pressure." "Otis, listen to me. If he doesn't get hydrated and stabilize in the next hour, that kidney is going to infarct. It will die, and he might go septic." I looked at Tiffany. She was watching me, trying to figure out who I was talking to. She saw the change in my face. She saw the flicker of fatherly fear that I couldn't hide. "Is it Darnell?" she asked, stepping closer. "Is he okay?" I listened to Dr. Hart. "He needs to go to the ER, Otis," the doctor said. "Now." I lowered the phone. "Your husband is dying," I told Tiffany. Her face went pale. "What?" "Dr. Hart says he has a fever of 103. His kidneys are shutting down from dehydration." Tiffany didn't move toward her car. She didn't pull out her phone to call 911. She looked at me, and I saw the gears turning in her head. She wasn't thinking about Darnell's life. She was thinking about the asset. If Darnell died, the house was hers free and clear. But if Darnell died, she lost the sympathy card. She lost the victim narrative. "Call an ambulance," I yelled at her, breaking my own composure. "Go." She stood there for a second longer, weighing her options. Then she sneered at me. "If he dies, it's murder, Otis, and I will make sure everyone knows you did it." She spun around and ran back to the Range Rover. She peeled out of the lot, leaving a cloud of dust that settled on my coat. I sat there alone on the pier. The silence of the lake felt heavy now. I looked at the water. I had turned it off to teach them a lesson. I had turned it off to save my dignity. But now my son was burning up in that dry, empty house. I put the phone to my ear again. Dr. Hart was still on the line. "Alana," I said, my voice trembling. "I'm here, Otis." "Go to the house," I said. "Pick him up. If Tiffany doesn't take him, you take him." "I'm already on my way," she said. "But Otis, you need to know something." "What?" "I ran a toxicology screen on the blood sample we took from you yesterday. The arsenic levels are dropping. You're getting better." But Darnell, his blood work from the hospital before discharge showed something else. What I asked. He wasn't just taking the meds we gave him, she said. There were traces of diuretics in his system. Water pills. I frowned. Why would he take water pills? He needs hydration. Exactly, she said. Someone was giving him diuretics to dehydrate him on purpose, to make him look sicker, to make the recovery look harder so they could delay your return to the house. Tiffany. She was drying him out. She was killing him not just by cutting the water, but by chemically draining him. She was risking my kidney, just to keep up the charade. Get him out of there, Alana, I commanded. Break the door down if you have to. I hung up. I reeled in my line. The hook was empty, but I had caught something much bigger than a fish. I had caught the truth. Tiffany wasn't just a thief. She was a black widow. And she was spinning a web that was about to strangle my son. I stood up, ignoring the pain in my side. The fishing trip was over. It was time to go hunting. I walked to the Lincoln where Jerome was waiting. Where to? Boss Jerome asked. The hospital, I said. And Jerome, yeah. Call the boys. Tell them to find out where Tiffany banks, not the joint accounts. The secret ones. The ones she thinks I don't know about. You got it. I looked out the window as we drove away. The city looked cold and hard, but I was harder. I was Otis King. And nobody hurts my blood, not even my blood. The rain outside the pawn shop window had turned into a steady, rhythmic drumming against the metal security grates. It was the kind of gray, relentless Chicago rain that washes away the dirt, but leaves the grime. I sat in the back office, nursing a cup of lukewarm coffee, listening to the clock on the wall tick away the seconds of my son's life. My side was throbbing, a dull, heavy ache where my left kidney used to be. Every time I breathed in, I felt the ghost of that organ. It was strange. They say amputees feel phantom limbs. I felt a phantom filter. I felt the absence of the piece of me that was currently inside Darnell, trying desperately to keep him alive while his wife played chess with his mortality. But as I sat there rubbing the scar through my wool sweater, I wasn't thinking about my own pain. I was thinking about Lucille, my wife, my partner, the only woman I ever loved. She died 20 years ago on a Tuesday just like this one. It was raining then too. I remembered the sound of the dialysis machine in the clinic. The whoosh and click, the smell of antiseptic and despair. Lucille had been sick for 3 years. Her kidneys had failed slowly, a genetic curse that she fought with a smile that never quite reached her tired eyes. I was building the business back then. We were doing okay, but we weren't rich. Not yet. The insurance had caps, the treatments were expensive, and the list for a transplant was a mile long. You had to have money to jump the line. You had to have influence. I had neither. I was just a contractor with dirt under his fingernails and a dream of building a castle for his queen. I failed her. That is what I told myself every night for 2 decades. I failed to make the money fast enough. I failed to buy her the best doctors. I watched her fade away, turning gray and small in a hospital bed until her heart just gave out from the strain. That failure was the fuel that built OK Construction. After she died, I became a machine. I worked 18-hour days, I took risks, I crushed competitors, I built skyscrapers and mansions because I was terrified of ever being poor again. I hoarded money like a dragon because I believed that money was life. If I had been rich back then, Lucille would still be here. That was my gospel. My burner phone rang, shattering the memory. It was Darnell. I stared at the screen. I didn't want to answer. I knew what was coming. But the father in me, the part that Lucille had nurtured, couldn't ignore it. I swiped answer. Hello, Darnell. Pop. His voice was a wreck. It was wet and gargling, panicked and weak. Pop, I can't stand up. I tried to walk to the bathroom and I fell. I'm lying on the floor. It hurts, Pop. My back hurts so bad. I gripped the phone tight. Did Tiffany call the ambulance? I asked calmly. No, he sobbed. She said if we leave, we lose the house. She said if the paramedics come, the sale is over. She is trying to find a private doctor who will come here. But nobody is answering. Pop, please, turn the water on. I'm so thirsty. My tongue feels like sandpaper. Call 911, Darnell, I said. Don't listen to her. Save yourself. Then his voice changed. The fear turned into something ugly, something spiteful. Why are you doing this to me? He hissed. You are just like you were with Mom. I froze. What did you say? You heard me, he spat, his voice rising with hysterical energy. You let Mom die because you were too cheap to pay for the private clinic. You let her rot in that county hospital because you wanted to save your precious money for your business. And now you are doing it to me. The air in the room seemed to vanish. I couldn't breathe. You don't know what you are talking about, I whispered. I know everything, he screamed. Mom died because you were a failure, and now you are killing me because you are a jealous, bitter old man. I hate you. I hope you die alone. You killed her. You killed her. The line went dead. I sat there, the phone still pressed to my ear, listening to the dial tone. It sounded like a flat line. You killed her. The words bounced around my skull. My own son. The boy I had raised. The boy I had just carved myself open to save. He believed I had let his mother die to save a few dollars. I put the phone down on the desk. My hand was shaking so bad I almost knocked over the coffee. Bull Johnson walked in. He had been listening from the doorway. He had heard the yelling. He saw the look on my face. He walked over and poured a shot of whiskey into a dirty glass and slid it toward me. "Drink, Otis," he said gently. "You look like you just saw a ghost." I didn't touch the drink. I looked up at Bull. We had known each other for 40 years. He knew Lucille. He was at the funeral. "He thinks I let her die, Bull," I said, my voice hollow. "He thinks I let Lucille die because I was cheap." Bull sighed, pulling up a chair. "He is delirious, Otis. He is sick. He is lashing out. He doesn't mean it." "No," I said. "He means it. That is the narrative he has lived with. That is the story he tells himself to justify stealing from me. In his mind, I am the villain. I am the miser who values gold over blood." I looked at the rain hitting the window. "It is time he knew the truth, Bull." Bull looked confused. "What truth, Otis? We all know we were struggling back then. It wasn't your fault." I shook my head. "We weren't struggling that bad, Bull." I turned to face him. The secret I had kept for 20 years was clawing its way out of my throat. "I had the money, Bull." Bull frowned. "What do you mean?" 2 weeks before Lucille died, I had saved up $40,000. It was cash. It was in a shoebox under the floorboards in the closet. It was for her treatment. We were going to transfer her to the private specialist at Northwestern. We had the appointment scheduled. Bull's eyes went wide. "Then why didn't you go?" "Because of Darnell," I whispered. I closed my eyes, remembering that night. The pounding on the door at 2 a.m. He was 18, Bull. He had just started college, or so we thought. Turns out he was skipping classes to play poker in the back of a pool hall in Gary, Indiana. He got in deep. He owed money to a syndicate. I took a shaky breath. They came to the house that night. 3 men. They had Darnell in the trunk of a car. They dragged him out onto the lawn. He was beaten so bad his eyes were swollen shut. One of them had a hammer. He put Darnell's hand on the concrete sidewalk. He raised the hammer. I flinched, seeing the image as clearly as if it were happening right now. He told me I had 5 minutes to come up with $35,000, or he was going to shatter every bone in Darnell's hands and then put a bullet in his knee. Bull stared at me, his mouth slightly open. "Jesus, Otis. I didn't have $35,000 in the bank," I said. "I only had the shoebox, the money for Lucille, the money to save her life." I looked at Bull, tears finally stinging my eyes. I looked at her, Bull. She was standing in the doorway in her nightgown, so thin, so frail. She saw her son on the ground. She saw the hammer, and she didn't hesitate, not for 1 second. She ran to the closet. She tore up the floorboard. She brought the box down. She threw it at the man's feet. She screamed at them to take it and leave her boy alone. They took the money. They kicked Darnell in the ribs one last time and drove away. We sat on the lawn holding him. He was crying. He was apologizing. And Lucille, she was wiping the blood off his face. She was kissing his forehead. She made me promise Bull, right there on the wet grass. She grabbed my hand and she made me swear on my soul that I would never tell Darnell. She didn't want him to carry the guilt. She didn't want him to know that the price of his gambling debt was his mother's life. So we canceled the appointment at Northwestern. We told Darnell the insurance fell through. We told him the doctors couldn't do anything. We let him believe we were helpless. Lucille died 10 days later. She died so he could keep his hands. She died so he could have a future. I picked up the whiskey glass and drank it in one swallow. It burned, but not as much as the memory. "I kept that promise for 20 years, I said quietly. I let him think I was a failure. I let him think I was stingy. I took the blame because that is what a father does. That is what a husband does. But today he told me I killed her. I stood up. The chair scraped loudly against the floor. He has been a parasite since the day he was born, Bull. He ate her sacrifice and turned it into more gambling. He ate my kidney and turned it into betrayal. He is not a victim. He is a black hole. He sucks everything light and good out of this world and gives nothing back but darkness. Otis Bull said softly. What are you going to do? I walked to the window and looked out at the street. The rain was stopping. The clouds were breaking. I am done protecting him, I said. I am done keeping promises to ghosts. Lucille was a saint, but she was wrong. You cannot save someone who refuses to be saved. You can only drown with them. I turned back to Bull. My eyes were dry now. The sadness was gone, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. Get the car, Bull. We are going to the house, he asked. No, I said. We are going to the hospital, but not to visit. I need to talk to Dr. Hart. I need the toxicology reports. And then I paused, buttoning my jacket. Then I am going to tell my son exactly how much his life cost. And I am going to watch him break when he realizes that he has been walking on his mother's grave every time he placed a bet. Lucille is gone, Bull. And as of today, so is Darnell. The only king left standing is me. Let's go. They say a lie can travel halfway around the world while the truth is still putting on its shoes. I learned that the hard way on a Tuesday morning sitting in the back of Jerome's pawn shop. I was eating a stale donut and drinking coffee that tasted like battery acid when my face appeared on the small television set mounted in the corner. It was the local news Channel 5. The headline screaming across the bottom of the screen in bright red letters made me choke on my coffee. The kidney butcher. Father cuts off life support to dying son. I watched in silence as the camera panned to Tiffany. She was standing in front of my house, the house I built. She was not wearing her expensive jewelry today. She was wearing a simple gray sweater, looking pale and exhausted, holding a tissue to her eyes. She was giving the performance of her life. He is a monster, she sobbed into the microphone, her voice trembling perfectly. My husband is lying inside fighting for his life after a transplant surgery, and his own father cut off the water. He cut off the heat. He wants his son to die so he can save a few dollars on the utility bill. We are trapped in there, terrified. Please, if anyone is watching, help us. We are victims of a cruel, vindictive old man. The reporter, a young woman with too much hairspray, looked into the camera with righteous indignation. You heard it here first, folks. A local hero turned villain. Otis King, the wealthy contractor, endangering his own son for petty revenge. Social media is already calling for his arrest. I turned off the TV. The silence in the pawn shop was heavy. Jerome looked at me, his eyes wide. They are killing you out there, boss, he said quietly. Twitter is blowing up. People are posting your picture. They are saying you should be in jail. They are saying you are the devil. I didn't say anything. I just felt a cold, hard knot form in my stomach. Tiffany was smart. She knew she couldn't win the legal battle over the land, so she took the fight to the court of public opinion. She weaponized my silence. She turned my discipline into cruelty. Half an hour later, the police arrived. They didn't kick down the door, but they banged on the security grate hard enough to rattle the teeth in my head. Jerome opened it. 2 officers walked in. One was older Sergeant Miller. I knew him from the neighborhood. He was a good cop, but today his face was hard. Otis, Sergeant Miller said, resting his hand on his belt. We need to talk. I stayed seated. Am I under arrest, Miller? Not yet, he said. But the district attorney is looking at charges. Endangerment, reckless conduct, maybe even attempted manslaughter if that boy dies. You can't just cut off utilities to a sick person, Otis. It doesn't matter if you own the pipes. You are crossing a line. I looked him in the eye. I didn't cut off his air, Miller. I didn't cut off his food. I cut off the luxury water to a $5 million mansion. They can leave. They can go to a hotel. They can go to the hospital. I am not keeping them prisoner. Miller shook his head. She says you froze the accounts. She says they can't afford an ambulance. She says you trapped them. She lies, I said. Miller sighed. He leaned in close. Look, Otis, I know you. I know what you did for this neighborhood. But right now, the whole city hates you. If you don't turn that water back on in the next hour, the DA is going to sign a warrant. And I will have to drag you out of here in handcuffs in front of those cameras. Don't make me do that. He turned and walked out, leaving the threat hanging in the dusty air. Jerome slammed the grate shut and locked it. He was pacing again, nervous energy radiating off him. What do we do, boss? He asked. We can't fight the cops. Maybe we should just turn it back on, just for a day. No, I said. I stood up. I walked to my bag and pulled out a small silver thumb drive. It had been delivered to me an hour ago by a courier service sent directly from Dr. Hart's private office. Tiffany wants a media war, I said. She wants to tell a story. Well, I have a story too. But mine doesn't need acting. Mine has pictures. I looked at Jerome. Where's that nephew of yours? The one who sets up the websites for the local rappers? Lil J. Jerome asked. He's upstairs playing video games. Why? Get him down here, I said. I need to go live. 10 minutes later, a skinny teenager with dreadlocks and a hoodie was setting up a ring light and a smartphone on the counter of the pawn shop. He looked at me with skepticism. You want to use TikTok or Instagram Live, Mr. Otis? He asked, chewing gum. Whatever reaches the most people, I said. We'll do both, he said. I'll link them. But you gotta be quick. People have short attention spans. I sat on a wooden stool. I smoothed down my jacket. I didn't put on makeup. I didn't rehearse a speech. I just held the thumb drive in my hand. Ready, the kid asked. I nodded. You are live. I looked into the tiny black lens of the phone. I saw the number of viewers ticking up. 10, 50, 500. It seemed the whole city was waiting for the monster to speak. My name is Otis King, I began. My voice was raspy but steady. You have all seen the news. You have seen my daughter-in-law crying. You have heard that I am a cruel man who is hurting his sick son. I am not here to argue with you. I am not here to beg for your love. I am a builder. I deal in concrete and steel. I deal in facts. I signaled to the kid. He tapped the laptop screen, feeding the video from the thumb drive directly into the stream. This is what happened 7 days ago, I said. The video played. It was grainy black and white footage from the security camera in my hospital room. It was silent, but the violence didn't need sound. On the screen, the world saw me lying in a hospital bed hooked up to tubes, unconscious. They saw Tiffany walk in. They saw her look around to make sure no nurses were watching. They saw her pull a document out of her purse. They saw her grab my limp hand, force a pen into my fingers, and guide my hand across the paper. The comments section on the screen, which had been full of hate and skull emojis, suddenly froze. That is the moment my house was stolen, I narrated. I was drugged. I was helpless. And she forged my consent. The video cut to the next clip. This was the one that broke my heart, and I knew it would break theirs. It showed me awake but weak, clutching my side. It showed Tiffany throwing a black garbage bag at my face. It showed her pointing at the door. It showed 2 security guards dragging a man who had just donated an organ out of the room like a sack of potatoes. I watched myself on the screen, stumbling in the hallway, barefoot, holding that trash bag. That bag contained my clothes, I said to the camera. That was all she let me take. After 40 years of work, after giving her husband my kidney, she threw me into the rain. The kid signaled to me. The viewer count had jumped to 50,000. I looked back at the lens. She says I cut off the water because I am cheap. No, I cut off the water because that house is a crime scene. She says she can't afford an ambulance. That is a lie. She has $3 million in offshore accounts that she stole from my company. She isn't trapping my son in that house because she is broke. She is trapping him there because she needs him to look sick for the cameras. I leaned in close. I am 72 years old. I am living in the back of a pawn shop. I sleep on a cot, but I sleep with a clean conscience. Tiffany King. If you are watching this, stop acting. Stop lying. Take my son to the hospital. The water stays off until you leave my land. I nodded to the kid. He cut the feed. The room was silent. Jerome was staring at his phone, scrolling frantically. Boss, he whispered. Look at this. He turned the screen toward me. It was the comments section. It was moving so fast it was a blur. OMG, I feel so bad for judging him. Did you see her throw that bag? She is a demon. Arrest her. That is elder abuse. Team Otis. Burn that house down. The tide had turned. It wasn't a ripple. It was a tsunami. Within an hour, the news vans were leaving the front of my mansion and heading toward the pawn shop. But they weren't coming to attack me anymore. They were coming for the hero shot. Jerome's cousin texted from the house again. It is chaos over here. People are throwing eggs at the gate. Someone spray-painted kidney thief on the brick wall. And the best part, Jerome said, grinning like a shark. The real estate listing. It just got updated. He showed me the Zillow page. The price had dropped. Not by a little. By a lot. Price cut $2 million. Nobody wants to buy a house that is famous for being stolen, I said, pouring myself a fresh cup of coffee. The brand is toxic. She can't sell it now. Not for 5 million, not for 1 million. It is a radioactive asset. I sat back. I felt tired. It is exhausting to fight for your dignity. But it felt good to know that the truth, once it finally put its shoes on, could still run fast enough to catch a liar. But the victory wasn't complete. The internet loving me didn't save Darnell. He was still in that house and he was still dying. The phone rang. It was Sergeant Miller. I thought you were coming to arrest me, Miller, I said. Miller sounded different this time. Respectful, apologetic. I saw the video, Otis. Jesus. I had no idea. Now you know, I said. The DA is dropping the endangerment investigation against you, Miller said. And Otis, we are opening a fraud file on her, but we need you to do something for us. What? We can't go in there without a warrant or a medical emergency. If you want us to save your son, you need to authorize entry. As the owner of the land. I stood up. I grabbed my hat. I authorize it, I said. In fact, I will lead the way. I looked at Jerome. Get the car. We are going home. And this time we aren't knocking. Desperation has a distinct smell. It smells like sour sweat mixed with expensive perfume. It smells like fear trying to disguise itself as confidence. I was sitting in the back of a black van parked 2 blocks away from an old warehouse in the industrial district watching a video feed on a tablet, and I could practically smell Tiffany through the screen. She was walking into a trap that had been set 20 years ago, not by me, but by the loyalty I had built with the men on these streets. Tiffany thought she was entering the criminal underworld to save herself. She didn't realize she was walking into my living room. She needed money, badly. The water was off. The potential buyers had fled like rats from a sinking ship. The article about her fake charity work was starting to circulate, and the creditors for her failed crypto schemes were calling her personal cell phone. She needed $500,000 just to stop the bleeding. She needed another $1 million to pay off the gambling debts that were threatening Darnell's kneecaps. She had gone to every bank in Chicago, but thanks to the fraud alert I had placed on the estate, nobody would lend her a dime. So she did what desperate people always do. She went to the sharks. But in Chicago, the sharks don't swim in the ocean. They swim in the concrete. And I poured that concrete. The man sitting behind the metal desk in the warehouse was named Raymond Big Ray Salgado. To the world, he was a loan shark, a man you didn't cross unless you wanted to learn how to walk without legs. To me, he was the kid I hired in 1982 to carry bricks when his father went to prison. I put him through school. I paid for his daughter's braces. Ray wasn't just an associate. He was family. And when I called him this morning and told him a woman named Tiffany King was coming to see him, he only asked one question. How much rope do you want to give her, Mr. Otis? I told him to give her enough to hang herself twice. On the screen, I watched Tiffany sit down on the dirty metal chair. She refused to look at the peeling paint on the walls or the water stains on the ceiling. She placed her designer handbag on her lap, clutching it like a shield. Ray sat opposite her, cleaning his fingernails with a pocket knife. He didn't offer her water. He didn't smile. Mrs. King Ray said, his voice deep and rough like gravel in a mixer. You come to me with a very large request. $1.5 million. That is a lot of cash for a Tuesday afternoon. I have assets, Tiffany said quickly, her voice high and tight. I own a property on Lakeshore Drive. It is valued at $5 million. I just need a bridge loan, just for 2 weeks. As soon as the sale closes, I will pay you back in full, plus interest. Ray looked at her. He knew about the water. He knew about the ground lease. He knew the house was technically worthless right now, but he played his part perfectly. I heard there were some issues with that property, Ray said, stabbing the knife into the wooden desk. Plumbing problems, legal disputes with the father-in-law. It is all resolved. Tiffany lied, without blinking. I watched her face on the screen. She was a natural. The old man is senile. He is being moved to a facility this week. The water is being turned back on tomorrow. I have a buyer from New York ready to sign. It is a done deal. I just need liquidity to clear some previous obligations before the closing. Ray leaned back. He pretended to think. He looked at the ceiling. He looked at Tiffany. I don't do credit checks, Mrs. King, and I don't care about your father-in-law. I care about collateral. I am offering the house as collateral, she said. I have the deed right here." She pulled the quitclaim deed out of her bag, the same piece of paper she had tricked me into signing. Seeing it made my blood boil, but I forced myself to stay calm. This was the moment. Ray took the paper. He put on his reading glasses. He took a long time examining it. "This looks legitimate," he grumbled. "But you know how I operate. I am not a bank. I don't do 30-year mortgages. I do short-term, high-risk lending." "I understand," Tiffany said. "What are the terms?" Ray opened a drawer and pulled out a contract. It was 1 page. Simple, brutal. $1.5 million in cash today, Ray said. "Interest rate is 20% per week. Full repayment due in 14 days. Tiffany flinched. 20%. That was robbery. But she nodded. She had no choice. And Ray added, sliding the paper across the desk, "Read clause 4 carefully." Tiffany looked down at the paper. I knew what it said because I had dictated it to Ray an hour ago. "Default clause," she read aloud, her voice trembling slightly. "In the event of a missed payment, or if the borrower fails to repay the full principal plus interest by the agreed date, the lender reserves the right to immediate foreclosure and possession of the collateral property. The borrower waives all rights to eviction proceedings or legal appeals. Transfer of ownership is immediate upon default." She looked up at Ray. "This means if I am 1 day late, you take the house," she asked. 1 minute late, Ray corrected her. "You missed the deadline. I own the keys. I own the furniture. I own the clothes in the closet, and I kick you out on the street. No judges, no lawyers, just me and my boys." Tiffany swallowed hard. I could see the sweat beading on her forehead. She was gambling everything. She was betting her life that she could flip the house or find another sucker before the 2 weeks were up. She was betting that she could outsmart the world. "I will sign," she whispered. She picked up the pen. Her hand was shaking, but she signed her name with a flourish. Tiffany King. Ray took the paper back. He checked the signature. Then he reached under the desk and pulled out a heavy black duffel bag. He unzipped it. It was packed tight with stacks of $100 bills. $1.5 million, Ray said. "Don't spend it all in one place." Tiffany stared at the money. It was the lifeline she had been praying for. She reached out and touched the bills, a look of pure, greedy relief washing over her face. She didn't know that the money she was touching had come from my private safe. She didn't know she was borrowing my money to pay off the debts she incurred by stealing from me, only to lose the house back to me when she inevitably defaulted. It was a perfect circle of justice. "Thank you," she said, zipping up the bag. "You won't regret this." "I never regret business," Ray said. "Just make sure you are on time, Mrs. King. I hate being late." Tiffany stood up, struggling with the weight of the bag. She walked out of the office, her heels clicking on the concrete floor. She looked like a woman who had just won the lottery, not realizing she had just sold her soul. I waited until she was gone. I waited until I saw her Range Rover pull out of the lot and disappear into the traffic. Then I opened the door of the van and walked into the warehouse. Ray was still sitting at the desk, counting the stack of cash I had left for him as a fee. He looked up and grinned. "She took the bait, Mr. Otis," he said. "Hook, line, and sinker." "She didn't even read the rest of the contract," I said, picking up the paper she had signed. "She saw the money and went blind," Ray said. "People like her, they think money solves everything. They don't understand that money is just a tool. If you use it wrong, it cuts your hand off." I looked at her signature. It was spiky and aggressive. "She thinks she has 2 weeks," I said. "She is going to try to bribe the water company Ray guessed, or maybe pay off the mob to get them off Darnell's back." "Let her," I said. "Let her pay everyone. Let her feel safe for a few days. Let her sleep soundly tonight." I folded the contract and put it in my inside pocket right next to my heart. "Because when that deadline hits, Ray, I want you there. I want you standing on the porch at 1 minute past midnight, and I want you to take everything." "I will be there," Ray promised. "And Mr. Otis?" "Yeah." "What happens to the boy?" "Darnell." I looked at the empty chair where Tiffany had sat. I thought about my son sweating and dying in that dry house, waiting for his wife to come home with a bag of cash that wouldn't cure his kidney failure. "He is not a part of this deal," I said quietly. "This contract is with Tiffany. She signed it. She owns the debt. But if we take the house," Ray started. "If we take the house," I said, walking toward the door, "then I am the landlord again. And I decide who stays and who goes." I walked back out into the cool evening air. The city lights were coming on, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. I felt a strange sense of peace. I had just leveraged my entire liquid savings to trap my daughter-in-law. It was a risky move, If she managed to sell the house in 2 weeks, she could pay Ray back and walk away with millions. But I knew she wouldn't, because I still held the water, and nobody buys a desert no matter how much gold is buried in the sand. I got back into the van. Jerome was behind the wheel. Did she sign, he asked. She signed, I said. Jerome shook his head. She just mortgaged a burning building. She thinks she can put out the fire with cash, I said. She doesn't know the fire is coming from inside the walls. Drive me to the hospital, Jerome. I need to see Dr. Hart. Tiffany has money now. The first thing she is going to do is try to move Darnell to a private clinic to hide him. We need to be ready to intercept. The financial trap is set. Now we have to make sure she doesn't kill the hostage before the game is over. As we drove away, I touched the pocket where the contract lay. It felt heavier than the cash. It was a deed, not to a house but to a reckoning, and the clock was already ticking. Tick, tock, Tiffany, tick, tock. The smell of a hospital is something you never forget. It is a mix of rubbing alcohol, floor wax, and fear. I had walked out of these double doors only a week ago, thrown into the rain like garbage. Today I walked back in through the main entrance. The security guards didn't stop me this time. They didn't drag me out. They looked at my suit. They looked at the way I held my head up, and they stepped aside. They knew the news. They knew the truth. I wasn't the crazy old man anymore. I was the father who had been wronged. I took the elevator to the 4th floor of the transplant unit. The hallway was quiet, the kind of heavy silence that hangs in the air when death is waiting around the corner. I walked past the nurse's station. Dr. Hart was waiting for me. She looked tired. Her lab coat was wrinkled, and she was holding a tablet with a grim expression on her face. "Otis," she said, her voice low. "Thank you for coming." I looked at the closed door of room 402. "How is he?" Alana, I asked. She sighed, tapping the screen of her tablet. "It is bad, Otis. He is in acute rejection. But it is not just biological, it is behavioral." She showed me the charts. The lines were spiking in all the wrong directions. "We found traces of alcohol in his system," she said, "and high levels of sodium. He hasn't been taking his anti-rejection meds, Otis. We did a count of his pill bottle. He missed at least 4 doses in the last 3 days." I stared at the chart. 4 doses. That was suicide. Why, I asked. Why would he do that? Dr. Hart shook her head. He told the nurse he was too stressed to remember. He said he was celebrating the house sale. He was drinking champagne, Otis. Champagne and anxiety. It is a deadly cocktail for a new kidney. The organ is fighting back. It is inflamed. It is shutting down filtration. His body is attacking the very thing that is trying to save him. I felt a cold anger rising in my chest. It wasn't the hot explosive rage I felt when they kicked me out. This was colder. It was the disappointment of a craftsman who watches someone take a hammer to a masterpiece. "And where is his wife?" I asked. "Where is the devoted Tiffany?" Dr. Hart looked down the empty hallway. "She isn't here, Otis. We called her 3 times. She said she is in a deposition. She said she is meeting with her legal team to file an emergency injunction against you for the water shutoff. She said she would come when she is done fighting for her rights." I laughed. It was a dry, bitter sound. "She is fighting for the house while her husband fights for his life," I said. "That sounds about right." I walked to the door of room 402. "Can I see him?" I asked. "He is awake," Dr. Hart said. "He is in a lot of pain, but he is lucid. Go easy on him, Otis. His blood pressure is dangerously high." I didn't promise anything. I just pushed the door open. The room was dim. The blinds were drawn. Darnell was lying in the bed, hooked up to more tubes than I could count. He looked terrible. His skin, usually a healthy brown, had taken on a yellowish-gray tint. His face was puffy, swollen from the fluid retention. He looked like a balloon that was slowly leaking air. He heard the door open and turned his head. When he saw me, his eyes widened. I expected him to be angry. I expected him to yell at me for the water, for the humiliation, for the video I posted. But he didn't yell. He started to cry. "Pop," he wheezed. His voice was wet and thick. I walked to the side of the bed. I didn't sit down. I stood there leaning on my cane, looking down at the son I had raised. "You look like hell, Darnell," I said. "It hurts, Pop," he sobbed. "My back, my stomach. It feels like there is a fire inside me. Please, make it stop." I looked at the IV bag dripping clear fluid into his arm. "The doctor says you stopped taking your pills," I said. She says you were too busy drinking champagne, too busy playing big shot in a house you didn't own. I forgot, he cried. I was stressed. Tiffany was screaming. The buyer walked out. I just wanted to relax. I just wanted one drink. One drink, I repeated. You traded a kidney for a hangover. Pop, please, he begged, reaching out a hand. His fingers were swollen like sausages. Help me. Talk to the doctors. Buy me the good medicine. I know you have money. I know you hid cash. Tiffany told me. Use it. Save me. I don't want to die. I looked at his hand. I didn't take it. Where is Tiffany Darnell? I asked. He flinched. She is fixing things. She is at the lawyer's office. She is going to get the water turned back on. I shook my head. She is not fixing things, son. She is securing the asset. She knows you are crashing. She knows if you die, she gets the sympathy vote. She gets to be the grieving widow. She is not here holding your hand because she is busy measuring you for a coffin. No, Darnell whimpered. She loves me. Does she? I asked. She drugged me. She threw me out. And now when you are lying here because of her greed, she is sitting in a conference room worrying about a contract. That isn't love, Darnell. That is investment management. He closed his eyes, the tears squeezing out and running down into his ears. I am sorry, Pop, he whispered. I am so sorry. I shouldn't have listened to her. I shouldn't have signed the papers. Please, forgive me. Give me another chance. I looked at him. I looked at the monitor beeping steadily. I thought about the scar on my own side. I thought about the night I woke up from surgery trusting him, loving him, only to be betrayed. Forgiveness is cheap, Darnell, I said softly. I can say the words, but that won't change what is happening inside you. I pointed the tip of my cane at his abdomen, right where the surgical bandage covered the transplant site. You want to know why you are in pain? I asked. You want to know why that organ is failing? Because I missed the pills, he mumbled. No, I said. I leaned in close, so close I could smell the sickness on his breath. It isn't just the pills, Darnell. It is the kidney itself. He opened his eyes, confused. What? That kidney was a part of me for 72 years, I said. It filtered my blood. It kept me clean. It survived poverty. It survived hard labor. It survived the death of your mother. It is a strong organ, Darnell. It has character. It has dignity. I tapped the bed rail with my hand. And now it is inside you. And it looked around. It tasted your blood. It tasted the greed. It tasted the betrayal. It tasted the weakness. Darnell stared at me, his mouth open in horror. That kidney has self-respect, son, I whispered. It is rejecting you. It is refusing to function. It is refusing to live in a body as vile and cowardly as yours. Pop, don't, he cried. You can pump all the drugs you want into your veins, I said, standing up straight. But you can't force a part of Otis King to work for a traitor. My flesh knows better. It would rather die than keep you alive to hurt me again. He wailed then, a sound of pure, terrified misery. You are killing me, he screamed. You are cursing me. I am not cursing you, I said calmly. I am just telling you the biology of justice. I turned to leave. Pop, wait, he shouted. Don't leave me. I'm scared. I stopped at the door. I looked back at him one last time. He looked so small in that big bed. You should be scared, I said. You are alone. Your wife is gone. Your father is done. And even your own body is turning against you. I opened the door. Good luck, Darnell. You are going to need it. I walked out into the hallway. Dr. Hart was standing there. She had heard the shouting. She looked at me with a mix of shock and sadness. Otis, she said. That was harsh. It was the truth, Alana, I said. I walked past her toward the elevator. My side didn't hurt anymore. The phantom pain was gone. I felt lighter. I had spoken for my kidney. I had given it a voice. And I knew with a dark certainty that Darnell wasn't going to make it. Not because of the medicine, but because you cannot graft a lion's heart into a sheep and expect it to beat. I pressed the down button. I had a meeting with Ray and Jerome. The financial trap was set. The medical trap was sprung. Now it was time to close the net on Tiffany. Darnell was a casualty of war, but Tiffany was the target, and I wasn't going to miss. The Cook County Courthouse is a building made of gray stone and misery. I have poured concrete for foundations all over Chicago, but I never worked on this building. I am glad I didn't. There is a coldness in these walls that has nothing to do with the temperature. It is the coldness of lives being dismantled, of lies being told under oath, of families tearing each other apart for a few scraps of paper. I sat at the defendant's table next to Bull Johnson. My side was aching a dull throb that reminded me I was incomplete, but my head was clear. Across the aisle, Tiffany sat with her team of high-priced lawyers. She wasn't wearing the shimmering silver dress she wore to the party. Today she was playing a different role. She was wearing a modest navy blue dress with a high collar, no makeup, and her hair was pulled back in a severe bun. She looked tired. She looked fragile. She looked like the perfect grieving wife fighting against a tyrannical father-in-law. All rise. Judge Eleanor Vance walked in. She was a woman who didn't suffer fools, known for her sharp tongue and even sharper mind. She sat down, adjusted her glasses, and looked at the two sides. This is an emergency hearing regarding the guardianship of Darnell King and a petition for injunctive relief regarding the property at 1500 Lakeshore Drive, she said. Mr. Reynolds, you may proceed. Tiffany's lawyer stood up. He was young, handsome, and spoke with a voice like warm syrup. Your Honor, he began, gesturing toward Tiffany. My client is living a nightmare. Her husband, Mr. Darnell King, is currently in critical condition at Northwestern Memorial Hospital, fighting for his life after a kidney transplant. And while he lies there, his own father, Mr. Otis King, has engaged in a campaign of terror. He has cut off the water to the marital home. He has frozen their bank accounts. He has publicly defamed my client on social media. We are asking the court to immediately suspend Mr. King's power over the estate, restore utilities to the home, and grant full guardianship of Darnell King to his devoted wife, Tiffany. Tiffany dabbed her eyes with a tissue. It was a masterful performance. If I didn't know she was a viper, I would have felt sorry for her myself. Judge Vance looked at me. Mr. King, she said, cutting off water to a residence with a recovering patient. That is a serious allegation. Bull Johnson stood up. He didn't look like the other lawyer. His suit was rumpled, his tie was crooked. He looked like a man who had slept in his car, but when he spoke, his voice filled the room like a jackhammer. Your Honor, Bull rumbled. My client didn't cut off water to a residence. He performed maintenance on his private property. And as for the guardianship, we agree that Darnell King needs protection. But he doesn't need protection from his father. He needs protection from the woman sitting at that table. Objection, Tiffany's lawyer shouted. Speculation. Overruled, the judge said, leaning forward. I want to hear this. Continue, Mr. Johnson. Bull walked to the center of the room. We are not here to argue about plumbing, Your Honor. We are here to argue about why Darnell King is dying. The plaintiff claims it is kidney rejection caused by stress. We claim it is something else entirely. Something much more sinister. Tiffany stiffened. I saw her hand grip the edge of the table until her knuckles turned white. She knew Bull was up to something, but she didn't know what. She thought she had covered her tracks. She thought the only evidence we had was the water shutoff. I would like to call Dr. Alana Hart to the stand, Bull said. The doors opened and Dr. Hart walked in. She was wearing her white coat, a stethoscope still around her neck. She looked like the voice of science in a room full of noise. She took the stand and was sworn in. Dr. Hart, Bull asked, leaning against the railing. You are the lead surgeon for Darnell King's transplant, correct? Yes, she said. And you have been treating both Darnell and his father, Otis King, for the past 6 months, I have. Bull picked up a thick file from his desk. He walked over to the witness stand. Doctor, can you tell the court why Darnell King needed a transplant in the first place? What was the cause of his renal failure? Dr. Hart adjusted her glasses. She looked directly at Tiffany. Initially, we diagnosed it as idiopathic glomerulosclerosis. Basically, his kidneys scarred over and stopped working. We assumed it was genetic or perhaps related to high blood pressure, assumed Bull asked. Did that diagnosis change? Yes, Dr. Hart said. Her voice was calm, but it carried a weight that silenced the room. After the transplant, Mr. Otis King's remaining kidney showed signs of strain that didn't match typical recovery patterns, and Darnell's condition deteriorated too rapidly. It didn't make sense. So I ordered a heavy metal toxicology screen for both patients. I watched Tiffany. She had stopped crying. She was staring at Dr. Hart with a look of pure, unadulterated terror. She started to whisper frantically to her lawyer, but he shushed her. And what did you find? Dr. Bull asked. Dr. Hart opened her folder. We found arsenic, she said. A gasp went through the courtroom. The stenographer stopped typing for a second. Judge Vance took off her glasses. Arsenic, the judge repeated. Yes, Your Honor, Dr. Hart said. Chronic low-dose arsenic poisoning. It wasn't one big dose. It was administered over a long period of time, at least 6 months. The levels in Darnell's blood were lethal. That is what killed his kidneys. And the levels in Otis King's blood were rising dangerously high just before the surgery. Bull turned to the jury box, even though there was no jury. He was playing to the judge. 6 months, Bull said. That is a long time. Doctor, is there any pattern to this poisoning? Yes, Dr. Hart said. We analyzed the hair follicles. The spikes in arsenic levels correlate perfectly with the weekends and evenings, the times when the family ate together. Bull walked over to Tiffany. He stood right in front of her table. Mrs. King, he said, his voice dropping to a growl. In your deposition last week, you stated that you are a devoted housewife. You stated that you insist on cooking every single meal for your husband and father-in-law to ensure they are healthy. Is that correct? Tiffany's lawyer jumped up. Objection. This is a guardianship hearing, not a murder trial. It is relevant to the safety of the ward, Bull roared back. If she is the cook and the food is poisoned, she is the weapon. The judge slammed her gavel. Sit down, counsel, she ordered Tiffany's lawyer. Mrs. King, answer the question. Did you prepare the meals? Tiffany stood up. Her legs were shaking. The act was crumbling. The fragile, grieving widow was gone, replaced by a cornered rat. I cooked for them. Yes, she stammered. But I didn't. I would never. Maybe it was the water. Maybe the pipes were bad. Otis is a contractor. Maybe he used bad pipes. Bull smiled. It was a shark smile. We tested the water. Mrs. King, it is clean. We tested the takeout food Darnell eats at lunch. Clean. The only thing we found contaminated was a spice jar in your kitchen. Bull held up an evidence bag. It contained a small glass jar labeled garlic powder. We recovered this from the trash at 1500 Lakeshore Drive yesterday after Otis King authorized a police search of his property. Tiffany's eyes went wide. She grabbed her throat. That isn't mine, she shrieked. Otis planted it. He is framing me. He hates me. Bull turned back to Dr. Hart. Doctor, one last question. The arsenic levels in Otis King, when did they start to drop? Dr. Hart looked at her chart. 7 days ago, she said. The exact day he was kicked out of the house. Since he stopped eating Mrs. King's cooking, his body has been clearing the toxin. Bull turned to the judge. Your Honor, he said softly, we have a son dying of poison. We have a father who was slowly being assassinated to clear the way for an inheritance. And we have the cook sitting right there asking you to give her full control over the victim. The courtroom was dead silent. All eyes were on Tiffany. She looked around looking for an exit, looking for a friend, but there was no one. Even her lawyer had moved his chair a few inches away from her. Judge Vance stared at Tiffany for a long time. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Mr. Reynolds, the judge, said to Tiffany's lawyer, You asked for guardianship. Yes, Your Honor, the lawyer whispered, looking down at his shoes. Request denied, the judge said. Her voice was like a steel door slamming shut. And furthermore, she continued, I am revoking Tiffany King's power of attorney immediately. Control of the estate and the medical decisions for Darnell King are returned to his father, Otis King. But she wasn't done. She looked at the bailiff. Officer, she said, do not let Mrs. King leave this room, Tiffany screamed. No, you can't do this. I am the victim, Judge. Vance pointed her gavel at Tiffany like a weapon. This court finds sufficient probable cause to believe a crime has been committed. I am referring this entire transcript along with Dr. Hart's testimony and the physical evidence to the district attorney's office. She looked at the police officers standing at the back of the room. Take her into custody. The officers moved in. Tiffany tried to run. She actually tried to climb over the railing, her navy blue dress tearing as she scrambled like a wild animal. It wasn't me, she screamed, pointing at me. It was Darnell. Darnell wanted the money. He made me do it. The officers grabbed her. She kicked and scratched, her bun coming loose, her hair flying wild. The mask of sanity had completely fallen off. She wasn't a socialite anymore. She was just a killer who had been caught. I sat there and watched. I didn't smile. I didn't feel joy. I just felt a deep, heavy exhaustion. She was screaming my son's name, blaming him, throwing him under the bus, just like she had thrown me out of the hospital. They dragged her out of the side door, her screams echoing in the hallway until the heavy wood slammed shut. Judge Vance looked at me. Her expression softened just a fraction. "Mr. King," she said, "I am sorry." I stood up, leaning heavily on my cane. "Thank you, Your Honor," I said. I walked over to Dr. Hart. She had tears in her eyes. She had saved my life twice, once with a scalpel and once with the truth. "Let's go, Alana," I said. "Where?" she asked. "To the hospital," I said. "I have a son to save, and now that the poison is gone, maybe, just maybe, we can save his soul too." We walked out of the courthouse. The sun was shining outside, bright and blinding. The nightmare of the legal battle was over. Tiffany was in a cage, but the real fight was just beginning. Darnell was still dying, and I had to go tell him that the wife he loved, the wife he chose over me, hadn't just stolen his house. She had been feeding him death one spoonful at a time. I got into the car. "Drive Jerome," I said, and for the first time in a week, I didn't look back. I looked forward, toward the hospital, toward the hard truth, toward the end of the line. The police tape stretched across the mahogany front doors of the house I built looked like a yellow scar. I stood in the foyer, leaning on my cane, watching the forensic team move through the rooms like a swarm of white ants. They were dusting for fingerprints on the crystal chandeliers. They were bagging documents from the library. But the real action was upstairs in the master suite. That was Tiffany's sanctuary. That was where she plotted, where she slept, and where she hid her secrets. I walked up the grand staircase slowly. My legs felt heavy, not from age, but from the sheer weight of the tragedy unfolding under this roof. Detective Miller was waiting for me in the bedroom. The room smelled of her perfume, a scent that used to mask the stench of her ambition, but now it just smelled stale. "We found something," Mr. King, Miller said, snapping on a pair of blue latex gloves. He led me to the bathroom. It was a palace of marble and gold, a shrine to Tiffany's vanity. The cabinets were open, spilling out thousands of dollars worth of creams, serums, and powders. But Miller pointed to a small, unassuming cabinet beneath the sink, hidden behind a stack of fluffy white towels. There was a glass jar there. It looked like a high-end face mask container, frosted glass with a gold lid. But the label had been peeled off. Miller picked it up carefully. "We did a field test," he said. "It tested positive for arsenic trioxide, highly concentrated." I stared at the jar. It was so small. It looked so innocent. You could slip it into a purse. You could hide it in a pocket. And next to it, Miller said, pointing to a plastic bottle, "Industrial strength herbicide, the kind you need a license to buy. It contains arsenic as an active ingredient." She was boiling it down, Mr. King. She was refining it in her own bathroom, turning weed killer into a weapon. I felt a wave of nausea. I thought about the soup she used to bring me. I thought about the tea she made for Darnell every night. She wasn't just cooking dinner. She was conducting a chemistry experiment on her own family. "She kept it next to her makeup," I whispered. Miller nodded grimly. "Yeah, like it was just another part of her daily routine. Put on lipstick, poison the husband, go to the charity gala." I turned away. I couldn't look at it anymore. The banality of her evil was terrifying. She didn't buy a gun. She didn't hire a hitman. She just went to the garden center and then to the kitchen. It was slow, it was painful, and it was intimate. "We have enough to charge her with attempted murder," Miller said. "But we need to establish a motive beyond just general greed. We need to know why now. Why the rush?" I knew why. Because I was getting suspicious. Because Darnell was gambling away the fortune she wanted to steal. She was racing against two clocks, my intuition and Darnell's debts. "I need to go to the hospital," I said. "I need to tell my son." The drive to Northwestern Memorial was silent. Jerome drove the car, looking in the rearview mirror every few minutes to check on me. He didn't say a word. He knew that some betrayals are too deep for conversation. When I walked into Darnell's room, 2 police officers were already there standing guard. Darnell was awake. He looked even worse than before. The news of his arrest, or rather the news of the investigation, had reached him. He looked like a man who had been hollowed out. "Pop," he croaked when he saw me. "Is it true? Did they really arrest her?" I sat down in the chair next to his bed. I didn't hold his hand. I couldn't. Not yet. "They raided the house, Darnell," I said. "They found the arsenic in her bathroom. She was making it from weed killer." Darnell closed his eyes. Tears leaked out, running down his swollen cheeks into his ears. "She told me it was vitamins," he whispered. "She put it in my protein shakes. She said it would help me build muscle. She said I looked tired." He started to laugh, a wheezing, broken sound. "She was poisoning me while telling me she loved me." I leaned forward. She didn't love you, son. She loved the insurance policy. She loved the house. And she knew that as long as we were both alive, she had to share. She wanted to be the widow Darnell, the rich, grieving widow. Darnell's face changed. The sorrow evaporated, replaced by a flash of pure, unadulterated hate. It is a terrible thing to see a man realize that his entire marriage was a murder plot. She wanted the money, he hissed. Yes, I said. Well, she isn't going to get it, Darnell said. His voice got stronger, fueled by the rage. He looked at the police officers in the room. Officer, he yelled, get a recorder. I want to make a statement. The detective stepped forward, clicking on a digital recorder. State your name, the detective said. Darnell King, my son said. And I want to report a crime, not the poisoning. I want to report the fraud. I watched as my son spilled everything. He didn't hold back a single detail. He told them about the shell companies Tiffany had set up in Delaware. He told them about the double books she kept for her interior design business. He told them about the tax evasion schemes she had been running for 5 years, using my construction company's reputation as a cover. She has a server, Darnell said, coughing between sentences. Hidden in the ventilation shaft of the guest bedroom. It has everything. The fake invoices, the wire transfers, the client list she was blackmailing. The detective was writing furiously. She used me to sign the checks, Darnell said, his voice trembling. She said it was just for tax efficiency. But she was laundering money, Pop. She was washing millions of dollars for some guys in Eastern Europe. I sat back stunned. I knew she was greedy. I didn't know she was a professional criminal. And the crypto, the detective asked. A scam, Darnell spat. She didn't lose the money. She stole it. She moved it to a cold wallet. She told everyone the market crashed, but she kept the keys. He looked at me. She has millions stashed away, Pop. She was planning to leave me anyway. The poisoning was just to speed up the probate so she could leave with the house money, too. The detective clicked off the recorder. This is gold, Mr. King, he said to Darnell. With this testimony and that server, we can put her away for 20 years for the fraud alone. Add the attempted murder and she will never see daylight again. Darnell sank back into the pillows, exhausted. He looked at me, waiting for approval, waiting for me to say good boy. But I couldn't. He had known about the fraud. He had participated in it even if he was just a pawn. He only spoke up now because she tried to kill him. It was revenge, not redemption. But it was enough. Just then my phone buzzed. It was Bull Johnson. Otis, Bull shouted. We have a problem. What is it, Bull? I am at the bank, Bull said. We just got the court order to freeze the assets. The judge signed it 10 minutes ago. And I asked, feeling a cold dread creeping up my spine. It is too late, Bull said. The accounts are empty. What do you mean empty? I demanded. She is in custody. She was arrested 2 hours ago. Bull swore loudly on the other end. She must have had a trigger set up, Otis. Or she used her one phone call to signal a proxy. 5 minutes before the freeze order hit the system, a wire transfer was initiated. $4 million, Otis. Everything she had liquidated. Everything she stole. It is gone. Where did it go? I asked. The Cayman Islands, Bull said. Through a maze of shell companies. We can see the exit, but we can't touch it. It is out of U.S. jurisdiction. I hung up the phone. I looked at Darnell. He was closing his eyes, drifting into a drug-induced sleep. What is it, Pop? He mumbled. I stood up. She got the money, Darnell, I said quietly. He opened one eye. What? She moved it, I said. She is in a cell, but she is $4 million richer. Darnell laughed again. That wheezing, painful laugh. Of course she did, he whispered. She always wins. I walked out of the hospital room. I walked down the long, sterile corridor. She didn't win. Not yet. She had the money, yes. But she was sitting in a concrete box. And I knew something she didn't. Money in the Cayman Islands is great, but you can't spend it at the commissary, and you can't use it to buy a new liver. I walked out into the night. The air was cold, but my head was clear. Tiffany thought she had played her final card. She thought the money was her escape plan, but she forgot that money leaves a trail, and Darnell had just given us the map. I called Jerome. Get the car, Jerome. Where to, boss? The federal building, I said. We need to talk to the FBI. The local cops have the poison. But the feds care about the money laundering. And if she moved that money across international lines, that is federal jurisdiction. I looked up at the sky. She thinks she is safe because she is rich, I said to the dark. But she just turned a state case into a federal manhunt. She didn't escape, Jerome. She just upgraded her prison sentence. Let's go. The game isn't over until I say it is. The Metropolitan Correctional Center is a triangular slit of concrete in the middle of downtown Chicago. It looks like a fortress designed to keep hope out and misery in. I had driven past it 1,000 times during my career, looking up at the narrow slits that served as windows, never imagining that one day I would be walking through the heavy steel doors as a visitor. The air inside was recycled and cold. It smelled of industrial cleaner and human sweat. I had to leave my cane at the security checkpoint. They said it could be used as a weapon. I told the guard that my words were the only weapon I needed today. I walked slowly to the visitation room, my side aching with every step. The physical pain was familiar now, a constant companion that reminded me of what I had given and what had been stolen. I sat down on the metal stool in booth number 5. The glass partition in front of me was thick, scratched by the wedding rings and fingernails of 1,000 other heartbroken people who had sat here before me. I waited. 5 minutes later, the door on the other side buzzed open. Tiffany walked in. The transformation was shocking. The last time I saw her, she was screaming in a courtroom wearing a navy dress in desperation. Now she was wearing a bright orange jumpsuit that hung loosely on her frame. Her hair, usually blown out to perfection, hung in greasy strings around her face. Her skin was pale, stripped of the expensive creams and serums she loved so much. But it was her eyes that held my attention. They weren't defeated. They were wild. They were burning with a manic, feverish energy. She sat down. She picked up the phone receiver. She didn't look ashamed. She looked like a predator that had been temporarily caged but was already planning the next kill. I picked up my phone. "Hello, Tiffany," I said. She stared at me for a long moment, and then she smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. It was a jagged, broken thing. "You look old, Otis," she said. Her voice was crackly through the receiver. "The stress doesn't suit you." "I look like a man who is free," I said, "which is more than I can say for you." She laughed then, a high, shrill sound that made the other visitors look over. She leaned forward, pressing her forehead against the glass. "You think you won, don't you?" she whispered. "You think because I am wearing this ugly jumpsuit and eating bologna sandwiches that you defeated me." "I think the arsenic in the jar speaks for itself," I said calmly. "Oh, the arsenic," she waved her hand dismissively. "That is just circumstantial. My lawyer will tear that apart. He will say it was for gardening. He will say you planted it. He is very good, Otis. He costs $500 an hour, and he is going to have me out on bail by Friday." I didn't say anything. I just watched her. She was delusional, fueled by the arrogance that had protected her whole life. And besides, she continued, her eyes widening. "Even if I stay here for a while, I still win. Do you know why?" "Tell me," I said. "Because of Darnell," she hissed. She looked at me with pure malice. "I heard the news, Otis. I still have friends on the outside. Darnell is crashing. The transplant is failing. Your precious kidney, the one you sacrificed so much for, is rotting inside him." She started to giggle, a sound that chilled my blood. "He is going to die, old man. You cut yourself open for nothing. You gave away a piece of your body and now it is garbage. And guess what? You don't have another one to give. You are tapped out. You are empty." I tightened my grip on the phone. She knew exactly where to strike. She knew that my son's life was the only thing that could hurt me. "He is dying because of you," I said, my voice low. "Because you poisoned him. Because you dehydrated him." "He is dying because he is weak," she spat back. "He was always weak. That is why I had to do everything. I had to handle the money. I had to handle the business. I had to handle his life. And now he is going to fade away, and you are going to be all alone in that big empty house. You will have your money, Otis, but you won't have a legacy." She leaned back, looking satisfied. "So go ahead. Gloat. Enjoy your victory lap. But remember, when you are burying your son next week, I will be sitting in my cell laughing. Because I took him from you. I won the long game." I looked at her. I looked at the cruelty etched into her face. I wondered how I had ever let this woman into my family. I wondered how Darnell had slept next to this monster for 10 years. I didn't get angry. I didn't scream. I just reached into my pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. I unfolded it and held it up to the glass. Tiffany squinted. "What is that?" "Another invoice." "No," I said. "It is a bank confirmation." I watched her eyes scan the document. It was a printout from the International Banking Division of the FBI, forwarded to me by Bull Johnson an hour ago. It detailed a wire transfer. $4 million. Sent from a shell company in Delaware to a numbered account in the Cayman Islands. She smiled. So you found the money, she said, shrugging. Good for you. You can't touch it. It is offshore. It is in a trust that is unbreakable. That is my retirement fund, Otis. That is the money I am going to use to buy my freedom. I moved the paper so she could see the bottom half. There was a stamp on it, a bright red stamp that said, Frozen. You are right, Tiffany, I said. I can't touch it. I paused, letting the silence hang in the air. But Interpol can. Her smile faltered. The corner of her mouth twitched. What are you talking about? She whispered. You made a mistake, I said. You thought you were just hiding money from a lawsuit. You thought this was a civil matter. But when Darnell gave his statement to the police yesterday, he didn't just talk about the poison. He talked about the money laundering. I saw the color drain from her face. He told them about the Eastern European clients, I continued. He told them about the tax evasion. That turned this from a state crime into a federal crime. And do you know what happens when the FBI flags a transaction as proceeds of international money laundering? She didn't answer. Her hand was shaking. They call their friends in the Cayman Islands, I said. They invoked the Mutual Legal Assistance Treaty. That account wasn't just frozen, Tiffany. It was seized. At 9 a.m. this morning. I folded the paper and put it back in my pocket. You don't have $4 million, Tiffany. You have $0. She stood up. The chair scraped loudly against the floor. You are lying, she screamed. That is impossible. My lawyer set that up. It is bulletproof. Your lawyer, I asked. You mean the one who charges $500 an hour? I leaned forward. I called him too. I told him the retainer check you wrote him is going to bounce. I told him the assets are seized. Do you know what he said? She stared at me, her chest heaving. He resigned, I said. He filed the paperwork an hour ago. He doesn't work for free, Tiffany, and neither does anyone else. No, she wailed, slamming her hand against the glass. No, you can't do this. I need that money. That is my money. I earned it. I put up with your idiot son for 10 years for that money. You stole it, I said, and now it is gone. I stood up. My legs felt strong. You are going to court on Monday, Tiffany, but you won't be wearing a designer suit, and you won't have a high-powered defense team. You will have a public defender. You will have an overworked, underpaid lawyer who has 5 minutes to look at your case. Please, she begged, the tears finally coming. Real tears this time. Tears of terror. Otis, please, don't do this. Help me. I have information. I can tell you things. I can help Darnell. You have nothing I want, I said. Otis, wait, she screamed as I turned to leave. You can't leave me here with no money. They will eat me alive. I looked back at her. She was pressing her face against the glass, her orange jumpsuit reflecting the harsh fluorescent lights. She looked small. She looked pathetic. You said I won the battle but lost the war, I said. You said I have no more kidneys to give. I tapped the glass with my finger. You are right. I can't give Darnell another organ, but I can give him justice, and watching you rot in this cell penniless and alone is the best medicine I can think of. I hung up the phone. I walked toward the door. Behind me I could hear her muffled screams through the glass. She was yelling my name. She was yelling about the money. She was yelling threats. But I didn't stop. I walked out of the visitation room and collected my cane from the guard. Everything okay, Mr. King, he asked. Everything is fine, I said, just taking out the trash. I walked out into the sunlight. The air smelled of exhaust and hot dogs, but to me it smelled like victory. I had stripped her of her weapon. I had taken her shield. Now she was just a naked soul facing the consequences of her own greed. I got into the car where Jerome was waiting. Did she take it well? Jerome asked. She took it like a true king, I said. She screamed. I looked at the hospital building in the distance. Now comes the hard part, I said. We dealt with the devil. Now I have to go see if God is willing to make a deal for my son. Drive, Jerome. We are not done yet. The machine next to Darnell's bed was making a sound like a dying radiator. Hiss, click, hiss, click. It was the only thing keeping his blood moving because his own body had finally gone on strike. I sat in the vinyl chair by the window watching the rain streak against the glass. The city of Chicago looked gray and tired just like me. It had been 24 hours since I watched Tiffany dragged away in handcuffs. 24 hours since I froze the Cayman accounts. You would think I would feel victorious. You would think I would be celebrating the destruction of my enemies. But there is no victory in watching your own bloodline wither away in a hospital bed. Darnell was awake, but barely. The toxins were building up in his brain again despite the dialysis. He was drifting in and out of a heavy fog, muttering names of people I didn't know, maybe gambling buddies, maybe debts he still owed. Every now and then his eyes would focus and he would look at me, not with love, not with remorse, but with a hunger. He looked at me the way a starving man looks at a locked refrigerator. "Pop," he wheezed. His voice was like dry leaves scraping on concrete. I turned from the window. I rested my hands on the handle of my cane, feeling the smooth wood under my palms. "I am here, Darnell." He tried to push himself up, but his arms were too weak. The IV lines pulled tight as he collapsed back onto the pillows, panting hard. The doctor came in, he whispered. "Dr. Hart." "She said the numbers are bad. She said the dialysis isn't working fast enough. My heart is getting weak." I nodded slowly. "I know." I spoke to her outside. Darnell licked his cracked lips. His tongue looked dry and pale. She said, "I need another transplant, Pop. A rescue transplant." She said, "This one, the one you gave me, is dead tissue now. It has to come out before it rots inside me, and I need a new one immediately." He paused, waiting for me to jump up. He was waiting for me to volunteer again. He was waiting for me to offer my other kidney or my lung or my heart. He was so used to me being his spare parts department. He was so used to taking that he had forgotten how to ask. I stayed seated. I stayed silent. Pop, Darnell said, his voice rising in panic. "I can't go on the list. The national list." She said the wait time in Illinois is 5 to 7 years. "I don't have 5 years. I don't have 5 weeks. "That is the reality, son," I said. "There are thousands of people waiting. Good people. People who didn't poison their donors. People who followed the rules." Darnell shook his head violently. "Screw the list," he hissed. "The list is for poor people. The list is for people who don't have the king name. The list is for suckers." He reached out a shaking hand toward me. His fingers were swollen like sausages. "You have the money, Pop." "I know you do. Tiffany told me about the secret accounts. She told me about the buildings you own. You are a millionaire 10 times over. You have liquid cash." So I asked, "So buy me one," he begged. "There are places." I looked it up online before they took my phone. China, India, the Philippines. There are brokers. Pop. For $200,000, we can fly a private medical jet. We can get a kidney tomorrow. A fresh one. A young one. I looked at him. I looked at the desperation twisting his yellow face. He wasn't asking for a miracle. He was asking for a transaction. He wanted me to go into the black market and buy human flesh to replace the gift he had squandered. He wanted me to treat a human life like a car part. "You want me to buy an organ?" I asked slowly. "Yes," he cried. "What is 200,000 to you? You just froze 3 million of Tiffany's money. Use that. Use her money to save me. It is poetic justice, right?" He tried to smile. He thought he was being clever. He thought he was making a deal. "Just write the check, Pop. Get me on a plane. I will be good this time. I promise. I won't drink. I will take the meds. Just buy it. Please. I don't want to die." I stood up. The pain in my side flared, a sharp reminder of the last time I tried to save him. I walked over to the bed. I towered over him. I looked down into his eyes and I saw the reflection of the boy I used to carry on my shoulders. But that boy was gone, eaten by the man who lay before me. "Darnell," I said. My voice was low, vibrating with a finality that silenced the room. "Do you know where those black market kidneys come from?" He blinked. "Who cares?" "I care," I roared. My shout echoed off the sterile walls. Darnell flinched, shrinking back into the sheets. "Those kidneys come from desperate people," I said, leaning in. "They come from fathers in debt. They come from mothers trying to feed their children. They come from people like me, Darnell. People who are exploited by the rich. People who are treated like cattle by men with checkbooks." I tapped my chest. "I gave you a kidney freely. It was a gift of love. And you poisoned it. You treated it like garbage. And now you want me to use my money, the money I made from sweating in the sun for 40 years, to go and harvest a piece of another human being. You want me to exploit some poor man in a village halfway across the world just so you can have a second chance to drink vodka and play poker." Darnell started to cry. Ugly, selfish tears. "But I am your son," he screamed. "Doesn't that matter? Doesn't blood matter?" "Blood matters," I said, "but character matters more." I pulled my checkbook out of the inside pocket of my suit. Darnell's eyes lit up. He thought I was breaking. He thought I was writing the check. He thought he had won. I opened it. I ripped out a blank check. I held it up. Then I tore it in half. And then in half again. I let the blue pieces of paper flutter down onto his blanket like confetti. My money can buy buildings, Darnell. It can buy justice. It can even buy a new wing for this hospital. But my money cannot buy a life for a traitor. Pop, no, he whimpered. You want a kidney, I asked. Then you do what every other person in this hospital does. You get in line. I pointed to the door. You fill out the paperwork. You talk to the social worker. You prove to the doctors that you are sober. You prove that you are worthy. And you wait. You wait in the dark. You wait while you are scared. You wait like the single mother down the hall who has been waiting for 3 years. You wait like the teacher on the second floor who has been waiting for 5. That is a death sentence, Darnell sobbed. You are killing me. No, I said. I am finally treating you like a man. I gripped my cane, feeling the wood bite into my palm. For 40 years I skipped the line for you, Darnell. When you got in trouble at school, I fixed it. When you got in debt with the bookie, I paid it. When you needed a house, I built it. When you needed a kidney, I cut myself open. I always put you in the front of the line. I stepped back from the bed. And look what it created. A monster who thinks he can buy his way out of consequences. A monster who thinks he is entitled to the flesh of others. I am done cutting the line for you, son. Otis, please don't leave me. I am not leaving you, I said. I will come visit you. I will sit in this chair. I will bring you magazines. I will hold your hand when you are scared, but I will not buy you a kidney. I looked at the dialysis machine one last time. You have to earn this one, Darnell. You have to fight for it. And if you don't survive the wait, then you die with the dignity of knowing that for once in your life, you didn't cheat. I turned around. Darnell was wailing now, a sound of pure, terrified grief. It broke my heart to hear it. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to fix it, to pull out the phone, to make the call, to wire the money. That is what a father does. He fixes things. But I knew that if I fixed this, I would damn him forever. If I bought him a kidney now, he would never learn. He would just be a vampire with a new lease on life. I walked to the door. I stopped and looked back. Welcome to the real world, Darnell, I whispered. It is cold. It is hard. And it is fair. I walked out into the hallway. Dr. Hart was standing there. She had heard everything. She looked at me with tears in her eyes. She didn't judge me. She nodded. She knew. She knew that sometimes the only way to save a soul is to let the body face the fire. I walked to the elevator. My side hurt. My heart hurt. But my conscience was clean. I had given him life twice. I could not give him a third time. Now it was up to God and the waiting list. The hallway of the 4th floor felt like a tunnel that never ended. I had just walked away from my son. I had just told him that he had to wait in line like everyone else, knowing full well that he probably wouldn't survive the wait. My chest felt heavy, like I had inhaled wet concrete. I wasn't regretting my decision, but the weight of it was crushing. I was a father who had just signed his son's death warrant with a clear conscience. I reached the elevator and pressed the down button. I just wanted to go home. I wanted to go to the empty quiet house that I had reclaimed from the bank. I wanted to sit in my chair and stare at the wall and try to figure out how 40 years of love had turned into this tragedy. Mr. King. The voice was soft but urgent. I turned around. It was Dr. Hart. She wasn't wearing her white coat anymore. She was holding a manila folder tight against her chest, and her face was pale. She looked like she had been crying, or maybe she hadn't slept in 3 days. Maybe both. Dr. Hart, I said, leaning on my cane. I already said goodbye. I can't go back in there. I know, she said. I heard you. And you were right, Otis. You were absolutely right. She looked up and down the hallway, checking for nurses, checking for police. But there is something else, she whispered. Something I couldn't say while Darnell was conscious. Something I couldn't say while Tiffany was free. She nodded toward a door at the end of the hall marked Chief of Surgery Private. Please, Otis, you need to hear this. I followed her. My side was throbbing. Every step was a reminder of the surgery, a reminder of the piece of me that was currently rotting inside my son's body. Or so I thought. We walked into her office. She locked the door behind us. She closed the blinds. The room was dark, lit only by a small desk lamp. She gestured for me to sit in a leather chair. She sat behind her desk and placed the folder in front of her. She didn't open it immediately. She just stared at it, taking a deep breath. Otis, she began, her voice trembling slightly. You are a good man. You are the strongest man I have ever met. You took a bullet for a son who was holding the gun. I looked at my hands. I gave him a kidney, Alana. That isn't taking a bullet. That is just being a father. She looked me right in the eye. No, Otis. You didn't. I frowned. The room seemed to tilt a little. What do you mean? I asked. I have the scar. I have the pain. I woke up minus one organ. I saw the chart. You have the scar, yes, she said. You had a nephrectomy. We removed your left kidney. She leaned forward, her eyes intense. But Darnell does not have it. The silence in the room was absolute. I could hear the hum of the refrigerator in the corner. I could hear my own heartbeat thumping in my ears. I don't understand, I said slowly. If he doesn't have it, where is it? Did it fail immediately? Did you throw it away? Dr. Hart opened the folder. She pulled out a series of photos. They were gruesome. Pictures of internal organs, pictures of a liver and a kidney that looked black and twisted. These were taken during the surgery, she said. When we opened Darnell up to put your kidney in, we found something the scans missed. The arsenic poisoning, it didn't just shut down his kidneys, Otis. It was aggressive. It triggered a rapid metastatic reaction in his liver cells. She pointed to the black spots in the photo. Cancer, Otis. Stage 4. Caused by the very poison he was taking to trick you. The toxins mutated the cells at a rate I have never seen before. I stared at the photos. The irony washed over me like ice water. Darnell had poisoned himself to get a kidney, and the poison had given him cancer that made the transplant impossible. We couldn't give him the kidney, Dr. Hart explained. It is against all medical ethics and protocols to transplant a healthy organ into a body that is riddled with metastatic cancer. It would have been a waste of a viable organ. It would have killed him on the table. So I whispered, "You closed him up." "We closed him up." She nodded. "Then why is he alive?" I asked, my voice rising. "It has been 10 days. He has been walking. He has been talking. He looked better until the rejection started." Dr. Hart sighed. "He isn't rejecting your kidney, Otis. He is crashing because the high-dose steroids and experimental adrenaline boosters I put him on are wearing off." She looked down at her hands. "I kept him alive with chemistry, Otis. I told him the surgery was a success. I told him the pain he felt was post-op recovery. I pumped him full of the strongest stimulants we have. It gave him a false burst of energy. It made him feel like he was healed." I sat back in the chair. My mind was reeling. "You lied to him," I said. "You lied to everyone." "I had to," she said fiercely. "Why?" I asked. "Why didn't you just tell us the truth on day one?" She stood up and walked around the desk. She sat on the edge of it right in front of me. "Because of you, Otis. Me. If I had come out of that operating room and said the transplant was canceled because of cancer, Tiffany would have known the game was up," she said. "But more importantly, I needed to get your kidney out." I touched my side. "My kidney." "Otis, look at the toxicology report again," she said gently. "The arsenic levels in your blood were lethal. But the concentration in your left kidney, it was critical. That organ wasn't just filtering poison, it was hoarding it. It was becoming necrotic. If I had left it inside you for another week, it would have ruptured. You would have died of sepsis." She took my hand. "I didn't remove your kidney to save Darnell, Otis. I removed it to save you." I stared at her. Tears welled up in my eyes. I had walked around for 10 days thinking I was a victim of theft. I thought they had stolen my body part. But they hadn't. This woman, this doctor, had used the surgery as a cover to perform a life-saving operation on me. "And you kept it a secret," I whispered. "To buy time," she finished. "If Tiffany knew Darnell was dying of cancer and that the transplant failed, she would have fled immediately. Or worse, she would have tried to finish you off with a pillow to get the inheritance before Darnell died. I needed her to feel safe. I needed her to think she won. I needed her to stay in that house long enough for you to recover, for the hair samples to grow out, and for you to find the evidence to put her away." I looked at the photos of Darnell's insides again. The black rot, the physical manifestation of his greed. "So he never had a chance," I said. "Even if I bought him a kidney on the black market today." "He would be dead in a month," she said. "The cancer is everywhere. The arsenic burned him down from the inside out." I closed the folder. "He killed himself," I said. "He did," she agreed. He poisoned the well, and then he drank from it. I sat there for a long time. The anger I had felt toward Darnell evaporated. The resentment I felt about wasting my kidney vanished. I hadn't wasted anything. I had survived. I was walking out of this hospital with one kidney, yes, but it was the healthy one. The poisoned one was gone. The cancer was gone. And Darnell. He wasn't rejecting me. He wasn't rejecting my love. He was simply facing the biological consequence of his own evil. Does he know? I asked. No, she said. I haven't told him. I thought maybe he should die thinking he had a chance. Thinking he was just unlucky with a rejection. No, I said, standing up. I grabbed my cane. I felt a surge of energy I hadn't felt in years. The fog was gone. The mystery was solved. He needs to know Alana. She looked worried. Otis, it might kill him. The shock. He is dying anyway, I said, but he is dying thinking I abandoned him. He is dying thinking his father's kidney wasn't good enough. He is dying thinking he is a victim of biology. I walked to the door. He needs to know that I didn't fail him. He needs to know that his father's blood was too good for him. He needs to know that he is empty. Otis. I looked back at her. You saved my life, Doc. Thank you. You are the daughter I never had. I opened the door. But I have to go finish this. I have to go tell my son that the only thing inside him is the poison he bought with his wife. I walked back down the hallway. The tunnel didn't look endless anymore. It looked like a path to the final truth. I wasn't walking to a deathbed, I was walking to a mirror. Darnell was going to look into it one last time, and I was going to make sure he saw exactly what was looking back. I wasn't a donor. I wasn't a victim. I was a survivor. And as I put my hand on the handle of room 402, I realized something that made me stand taller than I had in 40 years. They tried to take my heart. They tried to take my house. They tried to take my life. But they missed. And now I was going to make sure they knew exactly why they missed. Because you cannot kill a man who has already buried the part of him that was weak. I pushed the door open. Darnell was staring at the ceiling, tears running down his face. He looked at me hoping I had come back with a check. I didn't come back with money, son, I said, closing the door behind me. I came back with the biopsy results. And for the first time in his life, Darnell looked truly terrified. Not of death, but of the truth I was holding in my hands. The sound of a gavel hitting a block of wood is not loud, but it has a finality to it that echoes louder than any gunshot. I sat in the back row of the courtroom watching the woman who had tried to erase me stand before the bench. Tiffany was not wearing designer clothes today. She was not wearing the cream-colored dress she had used to play the victim. She was wearing county orange. Her hair, usually dyed and blown out to perfection, was showing dark roots and was pulled back in a severe, messy bun. The handcuffs around her wrists clinked softly as she trembled. The district attorney had not been lenient. They had the toxicology reports. They had the receipts for the herbicide. They had the wire transfer records to the Cayman Islands. And most damning of all, they had the testimony of her dying husband. Tiffany had tried to plead not guilty, claiming insanity, claiming coercion, but the jury didn't buy it for a second. They saw what I saw, a predator. Judge Moore looked down from the bench. She took off her glasses and rubbed the bridge of her nose. She looked tired of seeing the worst in people, but she was ready to deliver the remedy. Tiffany King, the judge, said, her voice cutting through the silent courtroom. For the counts of attempted murder in the first-degree elder abuse, wire fraud, and money laundering, this court sentences you to 20 years in the Illinois Department of Corrections. You will not be eligible for parole for at least 17 years. Tiffany didn't scream. She didn't fight. She just collapsed. It was as if the strings holding up a puppet had been cut. Her knees hit the floor and she let out a low, animal sound of despair. The bailiffs picked her up by her armpits. She looked back over her shoulder, scanning the room, looking for someone to save her. Her eyes locked on mine. I didn't smile. I didn't wave. I just nodded. It was the nod a foreman gives when a dangerous structure has finally been demolished safely. The job was done. The hazard was removed. I watched them drag her through the side door. The heavy steel door slammed shut, swallowing her into the system. She was gone. The woman who thought she was too smart for consequences, too pretty for prison, and too rich for rules, was now just a number in a cage. I stood up and walked out of the courthouse. The sun was shining, but I didn't feel warm. I had one more stop to make, one more goodbye to say. and this one was going to be much harder than the one I just witnessed. The hospital room was quiet. The machines that had been keeping Darnell alive for the past 2 weeks were still humming, but the rhythm had changed. It was slower now, more labored. The doctors told me days ago that it was a matter of time. The cancer accelerated by the arsenic and the stress had consumed his liver. His body weak from the failed transplant, and the years of abuse had simply stopped fighting. I walked to the side of the bed. Darnell was unconscious. He had been in a coma for 2 days. He looked so small. The bloating had gone down, leaving him looking skeletal. His skin was gray, stretched tight over his cheekbones. He didn't look like the man who had yelled at me. He didn't look like the gambler. He looked like my son again. He looked like the boy I used to take fishing on the pier before the world and his own choices twisted him. There was no one else in the room. No friends. No drinking buddies. No wife. Just me. The father he tried to kill. The father who was the only one left standing. I pulled up the chair, the same metal chair I had sat in for 14 nights. I reached out and took his hand. It was cold. His fingers were limp. I remembered how strong his grip used to be when he was a baby, holding on to my pinky finger like it was the only anchor in the world. I squeezed his hand, hoping for a squeeze back, but there was nothing. I didn't cry. I think I had run out of tears a long time ago. I felt a deep, hollow sadness, a canyon in my chest where my heart used to be, but my eyes were dry. I wasn't angry anymore. Anger is for the living. For the dying, there is only truth. "You made it hard, son," I whispered to the silence. "You made it so hard to love you." The heart monitor slowed down. Beep, beep, beep. I watched the lines on the screen. I watched the last reserves of energy fading from his body. I wondered if he could hear me. I wondered if in that dark space between life and death he finally understood. "Tiffany is gone." "Darnell," I said softly. "She can't hurt us anymore. You don't have to be afraid of her. You don't have to lie for her. You are free." His chest rose and fell one last time. It was a shallow, shuddering breath, a rattle in his throat, and then stillness. The line on the monitor went flat. The machine started to wail, a high-pitched alarm signaling the end. I didn't call the nurse immediately. I sat there for a moment with my dead son. I looked at his face. The tension was gone. The fear was gone. He looked peaceful. I stood up. I leaned over and kissed his forehead. It was cold, but it was still my flesh and blood. "Sleep now, son," I whispered, my voice breaking just a little. "In the next life, be a decent person. Be the man I knew you could be." I let go of his hand. I turned off the alarm. I walked to the door and told the nurse that it was over. Then I walked out of the hospital and didn't look back. I had carried him as far as I could. The rest of the journey he had to walk alone. 3 days later, I stood in the foyer of the mansion on Lakeshore Drive. It was empty. The furniture was gone. The art was gone. The echoes of Tiffany's screaming and Darnell's parties had faded into the walls. It was just a house again, a pile of bricks and wood and glass. I had listed it the day after Darnell died. I didn't want to make a profit. I wanted to perform an exorcism. I wanted to purge the greed from the foundation. The realtor, a nice woman named Sarah who knew the whole story, walked in with the buyers. They were a young couple, nervous, looking around with wide eyes. They knew the history. Everyone in Chicago knew the history, Mr. King, the young man said, shaking my hand. "We want you to know we are going to change the energy here. We are going to fill this house with kids and noise and love." "That is good," I said. "A house needs honesty to stand. Without it, the roof always caves in eventually." We signed the papers on the kitchen island, the same island where Tiffany used to mix the poison into the tea. I watched my signature hit the paper. Otis King. It was steady. It was strong. The check was for $4.5 million. It was a fortune. It was enough to retire to an island. It was enough to buy a fleet of cars. But I didn't want the money. That money had blood on it. That money was the reason my son was in a grave and my daughter-in-law was in a cage. I couldn't spend a dime of it on myself. I drove straight to the bank. I sat down with the branch manager, the same man who had helped me freeze the Cayman accounts. "I want to open a new trust," I said, sliding the check across the desk. "What should we call it, Mr. King?" he asked. "The Lucille King Foundation," I said. "And the purpose of the trust?" I looked out the window at the busy street. I thought about Lucille. I thought about the dialysis clinics in the poor neighborhoods, the ones with broken machines and long waiting lists. I thought about the people who didn't have a father to give them a kidney or the money to buy better care. It is for kidney patients, I said, specifically for those who can't afford the treatment. I want this money to pay for dialysis. I want it to pay for transportation to the hospital. I want it to pay for the meds that keep them alive while they wait on the list. The manager typed into his computer. That is a very generous legacy, Mr. King. It isn't generosity, I said. It is repayment. I walked out of the bank feeling lighter than air. The house was gone. The money was gone. The burden was gone. I was 72 years old. I lived in a small apartment above Jerome's pawn shop now. It had one bedroom, a small kitchen, and a window that looked out over the alley. It wasn't a mansion. It didn't have a swimming pool. But the water ran clear and cold from the tap. The heat worked. And when I laid my head down on the pillow at night, I slept. I slept the sleep of a man who had faced the devil in his own house and won. I slept the sleep of a father who had done his duty even when it broke his heart. I was Otis King. I was a builder, and I had finally cleared the rubble. Now I could rest. The sun over Lake Michigan was different when you stopped looking at it through the window of a hospital or a courtroom. It was brighter. It was cleaner. It danced on the water like diamonds scattered on a blue sheet. I sat in my folding chair with a fishing rod in my hand, feeling the gentle warmth on my face. It had been exactly 1 year since I walked out of the hospital, leaving my dead son behind. 1 year since the storm ended and the silence began. To my left, Bull Johnson was wrestling with his line, cursing softly at a catfish that was clearly smarter than he was. He was wearing a ridiculous bucket hat and smoking a cigar that smelled like burning leaves. To my right, Dr. Alana Hart was reading a book, occasionally looking up to check the bobber. She wasn't my doctor anymore. She was my friend, the daughter I never had. I took a deep breath. My side didn't hurt. The scar was there, a silver line across my abdomen marking the place where I had paid the price of fatherhood. But the phantom pain was gone. The heavy dragging weight of betrayal that used to pull on my chest with every heartbeat had vanished. I was 73 years old. I had 1 kidney. I lived in a small apartment above a pawn shop, and I had never been richer. Otis Bull grumbled, reeling in an empty hook. I think the fish in this lake are on strike. They must know I am a lawyer. They don't trust the bait. They don't bite because you talk too much, Bull, I said, smiling. Fish like peace. You sound like a jackhammer in a library. Alana laughed, closing her book. He is right, Bull. You are scaring the water. I looked at them. These were my people. Not bound by blood, but bound by the fire we had walked through together. We had taken down a monster. We had cleaned up a tragedy, and we had survived. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out. It was a text message from Clara. Clara was 68 years old. She ran the soup kitchen where the Lucille King Foundation donated most of its funds. She was a retired school teacher with a laugh that could fill a room and eyes that saw right through my tough exterior. We had started having coffee on Tuesdays, then dinner on Fridays. It wasn't a whirlwind romance. It was quiet. It was respectful. It was 2 people who had seen the hard side of life finding a soft place to land. I baked a sweet potato pie, the text read. Bring me a fish and we can trade. I smiled, typing back with my thumb. Bull scared all the fish away. I will bring the wine instead. I put the phone away. I felt a warmth in my chest that had nothing to do with the sun. For a long time after Lucille died, and after Darnell turned on me, I thought my heart was just a muscle for pumping blood. I thought the part of me that could feel affection had calcified, but I was wrong. The heart is resilient. It can break, it can heal, and it can open again if you let it. Otis, Alana said softly, interrupting my thoughts. Do you think about him? She didn't have to say the name. I looked out at the horizon where the water met the sky. Sometimes I said, Do you miss him? She asked. I thought about the answer carefully. I thought about the boy I taught to ride a bike. I thought about the man who stole my house. I thought about the stranger who died in that hospital bed. I don't miss the man he became, Alana, I said. That man died a long time ago. He died the day he decided that money was more important than family. The Darnell I mourn is the little boy who used to sit on my lap and ask me how to build skyscrapers. That boy has been gone for 20 years. I reeled in my line. I used to think I failed him. I used to think that if I had given him more, if I had loved him harder, I could have saved him. But you can't save someone who is determined to drown. You can only choose whether you are going to drown with them or swim to shore. I chose to swim. I chose to. Bull finally caught something, a small perch barely big enough to keep. He cheered like he had won the Super Bowl, holding it up for us to see. "Dinner is served," he shouted. I laughed. It was a real laugh. Deep and loud. "Throw it back, Bull," I said. "It has a life to live." And so do we. We packed up our gear as the sun started to dip lower, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. I walked to the car leaning on my cane, not because I was weak, but because I had earned the right to take my time. The Lucille King Foundation was opening a new dialysis center next week in the South Side. I was going to cut the ribbon. Clara would be there holding my coat. Bull would be there arguing with the city inspectors. Alana would be there running the medical board. I had lost a son. I had lost a house. But I had found something much more valuable. I had found my dignity. I had found my purpose. And looking at the faces of my friends, I realized I had found my true family. I got into the passenger seat of Bull's old Cadillac. As we drove away from the lake, I looked in the rearview mirror. The water was calm. The past was behind me, buried under deep water. The road ahead was open. I was Otis King. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't building for someone else. I was building a life for myself. And it was going to be a masterpiece. Many believe that blood is the strongest bond, forcing us to forgive the unforgivable. I learned the hard way that this is a dangerous lie. Being a parent means giving life, but it does not require sacrificing your dignity to sustain a parasitic soul. My son chose greed over gratitude, and in doing so, he severed the lifeline that connected us long before the surgery. True family is not defined by DNA, but by mutual respect and care. Sometimes the most heroic act of love is not to save someone, but to let them face the consequences of their own choices. Many people cling to the old saying that blood is thicker than water, using it as an excuse to tolerate abuse. I learned the hard way that this is a dangerous lie. True family is not defined by DNA, but by loyalty, gratitude, and mutual respect. I gave my son life twice, yet he chose greed over love. Cutting him off wasn't an act of cruelty. It was an act of survival. You cannot save a soul that refuses to be saved, and you should never set yourself on fire just to keep ungrateful people warm. Peace is the only legacy worth fighting for. If you have ever had to cut off a toxic family member to save your own sanity, hit that like button right now. And tell me in the comments below, if you were in my shoes, would you have bought that kidney? Or did Darnell get exactly what he deserved? Subscribe to the channel for more stories where justice is always served cold. I am Otis King, and I will see you in the next one.